So hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Naruto fanfiction. So we are back with a brand new movie on What If Naruto Had Super Harem with Irene in Fairy Tale movie. But before we start, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Now let's begin the story. Naruto emerged from the waters before standing still, his long blonde hair wet. He wore a long dark coat that was torn at edges, it had long sleeves nor no collars. Inside, from his waist, he was covered in bandages, halfway through his chest, leaving a toned part exposed. Down, he wore dark blue shinobi pants and shinobi boots. A wooden stuff was visible from his left shoulder. On his right hand, he held a wet straw hat, his eyes were cast upon the hat rather than the monstrous dragon, leaking a menacing intent just above him. "It's ruined," he said with disappointment before it became engulfed in dark blue flames. His eyes turned to the Dragon King. Acknowledgia's very presence amounted to death. There was no normal person who could stand before the dragon and not have his survival instinct screaming for him to flee. The very first time Naruto had met the dragon, a chance meeting, it had been. But the dragon had not bothered saying a damn word to him. It had immediately gone on to the assault. He had barely escaped. A couple of more rounds like that, and over the years, the dragon stopped trying to murder him simply for existing. In all those the dragon tried to kill him, Naruto had never fought back, he'd always worked on an escape jutsu. "I know you hate dragon slayers, but really, to try to eliminate everyone within the island. Isn't that a bit too much?" Naruto asked, shaking his head to try to dry off the water dripping off his head. Acknowledgia ignored what Naruto said. "Have you come to die as well?" Naruto held up both his hands in surrender. "I still love my life. There are too many women that I have yet to explore. It would be a shame for me to die here. And I have not come to fight either. I have not yet reached the heights of immortality to do anything suicidal as trying to fight you." Hearing that, Acknowledgia flapped his wings and started to fly away without responding to Naruto. While he could count the number of times he's met the blonde, Acknowledgia could not count the number of years it has been since their first encounter. Still, the fact that Naruto was simply going to run from him bored him. Acknowledgia was bored of it. There was nothing fun about hunting something that did not fight back. "Ah." Naruto looked dumbfounded as he pointed towards the flying dragon. "The damn lizard just walked away from me." Naruto didn't bother trying to pursue the dragon, not when he had been shown the mercy. Ridiculous. In all his years, that was perhaps the longest dialogue he has ever exchanged with the dragon. Trying to talk to Acknowledgia without any purpose of fighting was just a waste of time, not unless you were Irene or Zareth. He sighed and stared down at the water, looking at his reflection. He hated the image he saw. He had surely fallen from glory. He was no longer the person he once was. And seeing this face that looked innocent, irked him. He disturbed the waters to hide the image. "That is just sad," Kurama said in an amused tone. "Not as sad as the glorious Biju, once infamous, known for being able to wipe out mountains with a swing of just one of its 9 tails, now turned into a tiny little cat," Naruto shot back in a flat tone. "Ungrateful human, had I not done what I did, we'd be dead," Kurama shouted furiously. "I didn't deny it, I am just stating my situation is not bad, compared to yours," Naruto said before smiling. "Well, let us not fight. We failed to do what we came here to do." "And that was?" Kurama asked. Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment before shrugging when he could not think of anything. It must not have been important if I forgot about it," he said with nonchalance. "Still, can you believe that overgrown lizard just walked away from me? Are you the one to make that reference? Why do you focus on less important details?" Kurama sighed. "Talking to you is a waste of time. The dragon probably sensed that one thing comes in from the other ear and goes through the other." "Are you suggesting that I don't listen?" "I'm saying you don't listen to anyone," Kurama said in a stern tone. "Should we even stick around here?" Naruto looked around. There were ships coming, and probably from the Magic Council. He didn't want to get tangled up in that. And besides, if the council saw him, the Alvarez would know where he is. Flying under the radar was truly difficult. Still, he has managed to keep at it over the past months. He held out his hands and released a long breath. "This was a little underwhelming though," he said as he started walking away. "I thought if we could come here maybe things would become interesting. Should we return to hell?" "Sticking around here is just going to attract the Magic Council's attention anyway," Kurama said. "Let me out." The 9-tailed demon materialized on Naruto's right shoulder. Its form small, it was nothing more than a tiny tanuki. Kurama looked ahead. It was nothing more than just water. "You can see that you are just leading us farther into the sea, right?" Naruto blinked before stopping. "I knew that," he said. "I just don't want to take into the air, as those people might see me." "Yeah, right," Kurama said sarcastically. "Your lack of focus on other things will make you walk into a pit of flames one day." Not possible. Besides, I am the most focused person, he said before he started flying. While flying, he saw a boat with 2 people and then flew down. You're not just going down because it is women, are you? Correction. There is woman and a child, Naruto said calmly. He landed on the small boat. As soon as he touched on it, he fell on his knees, feeling sick. Arg! He cried, holding out his guts from spilling. He crawled over to the sides of the boat, and dipped his head into the water. You're an idiot, Kurama said with a blank look on his face. Altair was trembling. She had just escaped death twice. Merity could have killed her just now. And now, there was this. Her knees were shaking, her heart was pounding her ribcage furiously as if he wanted to flee. Every survival instinct inside of her screamed for her to jump into the waters. Even though this man looked to be sick, her brain told her to flee. The kind of magic she sensed was just monstrous. She'd never experienced anything like it. She didn't think possible. Her eyes turned to Merity. She was far worse than she was. Her eyes were wide. She looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Altair could not blame her. She thought she'd seen powerful people, but it turned out, she had yet to see anything. It has been long since I felt such fear from humans, Kurama said with a wide grin. It was not his power that they feared, but it didn't matter. Naruto and he were one. Naruto removed his head from the waters. The boat was no longer moving. He felt alive again. That had been dangerous. He needed to ask Irene to set up that enchantment to fix this little problem. Once calm, he flipped around and settled gracefully. When Brandish first saw us, I believe she nearly wet herself, Naruto in thought, smiling. But that is probably because she was still just a child and Irene was there. I wonder if she is still afraid of the woman. I really don't care, Kurama said. You are cold to my troubles, partner. Maybe we should have died in the face of the Otsutsuki, Naruto said before turning to Altair. His fear was obvious. He smiled. Sorry about that. Let me turn it down a bit for you. We don't want the little one dying of shock. Altair could now breathe freely. She cast a glance towards Merity. She was breathing heavily, as if a moment ago, she had been suffocated. This is your fault, because our powers are now combined. The peaceful energy I once gave off has been replaced by a murderous intent, Naruto said with a stare. Kurama snorted. You've just become much more twisted, he then grinned. Well, I won't admit that my power has some effect, he said. Who are you? Altair asked, after finding her voice. Naruto faced the woman. He recognized her. You are a member of the Magic Council, he said. I have bad luck. His glance became a hard stare and his tone demanded an answer. Where is Zeref? I don't know, you're not lying, Naruto said before adopting a thoughtful look on his face. It seems he has gone, but I'd sensed his magic just before Agnologia attacked, he said as he started floating above the above. A second later, he was gone. Naruto was lying under a tree, straw hat covering his face, with Kurama lying on his chest. Irene just stared at this careless person with cold eyes. How long has he gone missing from her? Not mention the Empire. She had frustrated every way she knew how to find him, and yielded no results. When it came to hiding, from her especially he was rather good at it. Her grip on her stuff strengthened slightly as she thought of trying to hit him or turning him into that mysterious fox lying on him, but knowing him, he probably had a magic set to guard against enchantments. Instead, she just kicked him. Ow, Naruto cried as his eyes snapped open. What was that for? Irene poked the blonde with her stuff on the side of his chest. How long were you going to pretend to be asleep? Naruto closed both his eyes and then opened just one eye, and glanced at Irene for a second before smiling. I was hoping you'd put a foot on my face so I can get a better view of there, he said casually. Are you not going to amuse me? I do not serve to amuse you, Irene responded by hitting him on his left knee with her stuff. Ouch! Naruto cried while lifting up his left foot. Despite the movements, Kurama didn't move. He just kept sleeping as if nothing was happening. You'll break my leg. Break him? Irene thought it was laughable. There probably wasn't any human who could match him in terms of physical strength. Naruto trained with the obsession of a jealous demon trying to impress a lover. She could never follow his route when it came to training his body. But that was simply due to self-loathing. He didn't want to use his magic or at least its most potent spells. When was the last time she even saw him using his true magic? All that power wasted. And he has shown much promise. Even Zeref had been impressed when he first saw him. But now, he was just an average mage with a hidden potential. Some children simply could not grow out of their naivety. But he was not a child, was he? Where have you been? Naruto massaged his knee in silence before placing both hands below his head. He then closed his eyes and responded. There and there, he said with indifference. You have been looking for me. Did she care that much that she would be worried for his safety? Naruto didn't think so. Maybe she cared for him a little, but not enough to do certain things when it came to the Empire. But she also would not care enough to even look for him if it was on the command of August. Hell, if the others branded him a traitor, she wouldn't even blink and would make no attempt to hunt him down. Their relationship was like that. It had never been one based in emotions, although, over the last years, there has been flashes of it. But it was never allowed to blossom, lest it became an inconvenience. Despite all that, she would kill him if she has the chance. Not going after him would simply be because she has other better things to do than waste time chasing someone who'll eventually come to her. I'm not bothered by your disappearing acts since this isn't the first time nor the longest time you disappeared from me, Irene said. But this isn't like those years back then when the Empire did not know you. I'm rather displeased that you also went your way to avoid me, she said in a cold tone. Naruto opened his right eye to look at Irene. Her cold eyes were staring at him with intensity that would make a small person wet with sweat. Despite that look, she was still a beautiful woman. Age aside, and the fact that she was a dragon, she was truly a beautiful woman. If his old self ever saw that he held a partnership with a sadistic woman who murdered people without blinking, he'd be shocked heartless and Kurama would probably laugh. But that was just a mere past that held no bearing into his current life. Here, he was simply Naruto, and nothing more. He did as he pleased and whenever he pleased. If he felt like channeling a Shikamaru, he could do it and then sleep all day. It was his freedom. There were no dreams to become something, to prove to people that he was good and could become the greatest. He'd achieved his dreams and was satisfied with them. Of course, you'd be displeased, he said. But I thought we spoke about this. Besides, this is not the first time I disappear. What you pulled years ago hasn't been forgotten, Irene reminded him. If you start disappearing like this, Invil becomes anxious and plots something dangerous. And if they all come after you, you probably won't survive since you refuse to use your magic. I wouldn't stay in a place where they could fight me, and I do use my magic, just not in its fullness, Naruto said. That incident was years ago, and I was only fulfilling Zaref's wishes, even though he didn't say anything, and it is an example that I am always prepared to use that magic, if the need arises. The blonde paused before changing the subject. Have you come to take me back? I do not care if you return or stay away, but you cannot keep doing this. You must decide if you still want to be part of the Empire or not. And if you decide to leave and should you ever stand in my way, there will be no mercy. Naruto smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less, he said calmly. If you have not come to collect me, what do you want? Where have you been? Naruto sighed. Ishgar, he said. Then. Irene narrowed her eyes dangerously. You enjoy going there. This is not the first time you have gone to Ishgar when you have disappeared. When we were going to war, you opposed it, but you have no attachment to the continent, so why do you consistently go there? There are many beautiful women, Naruto answered. And they are not cold-hearted and sadistic. They are actually tender and loving, unlike some people, he said. Did you find it? I did, but I didn't tell anyone. August may have seen it nevertheless. Nothing much escapes his eyes when it comes to magic. It was rather reckless of you to leave it there for longer periods knowing that if it accumulated too much magic, it would become noticeable. I'd forgotten, and I'm only remembering now because I see that cold-hearted look on your face. It is more the same look you had when you were teaching me magic, Naruto said with a slight shake of his head. When you decide to return, you will explain it to me plainly, Irene said before turning away from him. She stopped and glanced back with sharp eyes. That is clear, yes? Yes, ma'am. Irene disappeared without another word. What do you even see in that woman? Kurama asked after Irene walked away. He had lived with her and he knew just how cold she was. But he had never exchanged too many words with her, not when Naruto was not around. His existence, his being, it was one thing that she has tried to figure out unsuccessfully, and no matter what she tries with Naruto, the blonde has refused to go any farther than telling her his name. She'd stopped trying and now she just ignored him. But still, she was way too unpleasant for Naruto. He didn't have to hate himself if he willingly kept in the company of such people. You wouldn't understand even if I told you, my fury friend, Naruto responded with a tiny smile on his lips. Have you become a masochist? Naruto laughed. Not at all, he said. People can be cold, heartless, commit mass murder, and yet still love someone. The human heart is a very interesting thing. I never did actually think Irene could care for someone. In the first day our paths crossed, she didn't try to lead me with false pretense, she showed me just how cruel she was. I mean, she loudly contemplated ways of making me suffer for kicking one of her children. Of course, she is also a liar. She isn't every honest, he said. You have come quite cruel yourself. At some point, I didn't think that it would be possible. Naruto shrugged. A person can become anything and anyone. The most humble person can become a ruthless killer with pain and the thought of vengeance. I've thought of it, it is usually the fear that stops people from doing many things. But when you lose that sense of fear, you can do anything. I guess I have lost that fear as well, and that is why I do anything. And you'll never regain, not unless a miracle occurs. Maybe I'll fall in love, Naruto responded with a smile. Kurama snorted. You shouldn't even think of leaving the shields, you are quite like them, but a little more conservative, like August, he said. Well, not that I care either way, as long as you are alive, I am alive. So much for having a partner who cares, Naruto said before falling silent. The shields. Their last war had stopped, and it was him and the council. They were going to try again, and Naruto didn't know if he cared enough to even try to stop them. Either way, sticking around with them no longer served any purpose. He'd stuck around, done some good and horrible things. The magic that he had learned from Irene and caused much terror than even the most cruel would applaud. It had been a rather unpleasant start to his life here, but he had ended it when he'd come to his senses. It didn't help that the shields were brutal human monsters, who wanted to crush anything that stood in the way. The decision before us is not a small one, Naruto said in a tired tone. I have been thinking about it long and there probably is no other way to do things. Maybe I've become even twisted. This other day, I thought Zarif was actually a very nice person, he said with a slight shake of his head. He can be a nice person, Kurama stressed. But he can turn into something else entirely devilish, Naruto said. Departing no doubt is the right option here. Are you sure about that? Naruto understood what Kurama was asking. They would hunt him down, they would not want to leave him be. But Zarif would probably not care. He'd never been loyal to anyone but himself either way. But Naruto was ready to leave, though not ready to fight the shields of the Emperor. He could afford to live his life freely, seeing women naked, exploring new magic and strengthening himself to be able to face the dangers of this world. Though not ready to fight the Spriggan, Naruto didn't fear them. What did he fear anyway? He'd stopped fearing Acnology long ago. He didn't fear his own death. Leaving is also saving the little humanity I have left. I don't want to lose that, Naruto said in a firm tone. I like myself dearly, he said. But we must be prepared or anything. If I still had my power, there would be no need to worry, Kurama said confidently. This had been a disappointing turn of events. Surviving the turn of events in the shinobi world had come at a cost, a great cost for that matter. But who could have thought that after the power he gained along with Sasuke, there would be someone else who could come with greater power? We will restore you, Naruto said firmly. But it will require time. I thought if I stuck around these people for long enough, I would be able to gather enough magic while saving my life. But then, I could not simply abandon Irene after everything she did for us. Those shields, despite their power, they were literally just children before him. Of course, he could not count August and Irene. The Dragon Queen was a Ba-chan. She was old. Naruto had lived his fair share number of years that would make even a pure Uzumaki envious, but it was nothing compared to the number of years Irene has lived. You're being too nice, Kurama warned. I thought you'd lost all that naivety in you. You actually thought that you could change her at first. It must be the reason why you still cannot leave her despite knowing just how much of a cruel person she is, the Biju said, staring at Naruto. Naruto frowned. He was being lectured. He smacked the fox on his head and then grinned. You're too small to lecture me, he said. Kurama glared at the blonde murderously. He felt frustrated right now. He still had the strength to toss the blonde to the side despite his small form. But Naruto was likely to avoid him or just laugh it off. That green Jonin from Konoha would be proud with just how much Naruto trained his muscles to be fit. Trying to get him on physical attacks was at times a waste of time. Kurama sighed and thought against attack the blonde. There, good pet, Naruto said patting the Kyuubi on its head. Kurama tossed the hand away and jumped on Naruto's face. His paws grabbed the blonde's ears, and he glared. Naruto grabbed him by his tails but did not pull, knowing that he would only be in pain if he did. Kurama smiled dangerously. I may not have much, but how hurt would you be if I hit you with a Bijudama from his distance? Naruto still grinned. Don't you mean mini Bijudama? He said with a laugh. I won't let you go. If you blast me away, I take both your ears with me. You'll regrow them, but you'll still suffer the pain. Either way, there is pain in the end, right? Kurama said. You cold-hearted Biju, I'm not letting you out again. You will, Kurama said with confidence. I'm certain that you won't just allow me to hit you, and if I release a jutsu, I will lose my energy and will be forced to return. I want to stay out a bit, for you to avoid pain. Why don't you apologize for mocking me? Sorry, Kyuubi-sama. I didn't mean to. Naruto trailed off when he sensed a spike of energy. Wow, come on Kurama, you don't ha. Naruto shouted, in panic mode while trying to pull the Biju away from him. Boom. Kurama shot a powerful beam of crimson energy from his mouth, hitting the blonde straight on his face. When everything settled, Naruto's head was badly burnt, but his eyes were wide open. Although it was a little unrecognizable, he had a deep frown on his lips. Green energy covered his face before healing him completely. He stood there for a moment before sighing as he got up. "I'm going to allow Irene to do an enchantment on you to turn you into a dog," he threatened. "But for now, we must leave here since you exposed us by releasing magic." Kurama shrugged. Honestly, that felt good. Naruto had made fun of him for too long. He didn't care if someone found them. "That woman sounded serious. You don't want to be gone for too long from her," he said. "I never said when I would return. Irene does not control me in any way." "Since when? You used to follow her like a dog at one stage." Naruto looked below his hat, scanning the palace of the emperor. How many years since he last stepped into this treacherous place that housed inhuman people who followed the most dangerous mage to have ever lived in Earthland? Naruto shook his head. Indifferent to death as he was when in the mood, Zeref did not merit the same kind of evil the Magic Council bestowed on his name. Still, his followers had no love. Naruto had seen it all. He'd been part of it. He'd been part of them. Although not truly a shield in the sense, he'd been part of them. He'd stood before the Emperor and shared some moments. But it was going to come to an end. Probably, no matter what Zeref could do in the future, he was never going to hate the mage. But it didn't mean he couldn't try to kill him. Shaking his head, Naruto placed both his hands inside his pockets and slowly walked through the streets. It was very lively. As it has always been. The history of the Emperor here was different from Ishgar. Some of these people didn't even know Ishgar called their Emperor Zeref. But that had been his home. He just left it to form this great empire. "Should I make a cool entrance, Kurama?" Naruto asked. "You have too much time to waste. Don't include me in such nonsense. You're not going to say anything stupid that'll have us leaving in a hurry, are you?" Kurama asked. Naruto tended to say anything that came to mind, especially when a little excited. "I'm not that stupid. Sometimes I wonder. You have grown, but sometimes you act like that stupid brat who was dense and blind as a blind man." "That's not fair," Naruto said. "To compare me to a blind man is just not fair." "To the blind man," Kurama said with a laugh. "Well, I'll admit you've grown. But I won't bail you out if you get excited and say something that will have them turn on you. And I would rather we not run." It hurt his pride too much to tuck his tails and then run. It was simply better to just avoid confrontation than face humiliation. "It is not that you could help if you wanted to. These days, the only use you are to me is simply keeping from getting bored," Naruto said. Kurama ignored Naruto. The palace guards didn't mind him. The only reason he'd even come here was because the Spriggan had gathered. Well, at least some of them would do so. They usually didn't honor a call to have a meeting. As he slowly walked towards the throne room, Naruto saw Brandish and then smiled. Out of everyone within this palace, she was the only person who had light in her. It was not to say she was not capable of cruel acts, she was, but she was still a nice person. If one was to go on a murdering spree, she would be left alive. When last did he see her? She seemed to have grown a bit. It was nice that she had grown into a beautiful young woman. He concealed his presence and tried to sneak up behind her. Being a shinobi helped in this manner. Sneaking up on people was much easier. It was laughable that he only learned the trade when he had grown. But it was still useful. Brandish squealed. She felt a sudden touch on the sides of her chest. The touch had been a little sensitive. She twisted around, ready to cast her magic to whoever harassed her like that. But when she saw the amused look on Naruto, she smiled and lunged at him. "Naruto!" she exclaimed and happily hugged him. A woman who was thought-provoking in the way she dressed. As she held her, Naruto felt her soft skin, her pleasant smell. It was not fair. He had known her when she was even a child, even though she had not known him then. But who cared? She was a grown woman now. "Brandish," Naruto uttered softly. "Good seeing you again, half naked, I mean," he added with a wide smile. Brandish quickly pulled herself away from Naruto. She didn't bother trying to cover herself. There was nothing in Naruto's eyes that made her feel naked, despite his words. But then again, he could fool anyone with his words. She sighed and turned to walk towards the throne room without responding to it. "I thought you were dead," she said, glancing at him through the corner of her eyes. "That's a little harsh." Brandish shrugged. "It is what one naturally thinks when a person suddenly disappears." "It did appear that even Lady Irene didn't know where you were," she said. "Got into a great battle?" she said, glancing at the bandages. He usually kept his chest exposed, wearing just that magic-enhanced coat. Naruto placed his right hand on his stomach. "A little accident with magic," he said with a sheepish smile. "Date later on?" Brandish shook her head. Your standing is a little questionable right now. It's been 2 years. If I stick around you, it will only bring trouble for me, she said. Have that cleared out and we can hang out. Naruto sighed. He should have expected her to give such a response. Then it must mean that these people have been talking about him. If Brandish already saw it as troublesome, then there was trouble. Then again, his record hasn't been that great recently. He allowed Brandish to step into the throne room as he stayed outside. There is a presence in there I am not familiar with, he said to Kurama. How should we go in there? How about walking through the doors? Kurama responded with a blank look. No. There is no drama in that. I want something curious. What if I transform into Zareth and then have them all kneel before me? He asked with a smile, just happy about the image he saw. If you want to die, go ahead. August would be the one to actually try to shoot me for disrespecting the Emperor, Naruto said with a shake of his head. His zeal for his master is that of a fanatical demon. The demons of Tartaros do their all to awake an end, but it is their passion that one can compare with the passion the Wizard King shows to his father. It is good you didn't get sucked into it, Kurama said. Naruto nodded. The large double doors stood before him and not knowing how to make a grand entrance, he just kicked them open, forcing all eyes to turn on him. August, Irene, Demaria, Brandish and the person he recognized as a former wizard saint were the ones present in the throne room. I have returned, my friends, he announced. We appreciate you returning, Invul suddenly said, appearing behind him. The Winter General stopped on his right side and pushed up his glass before speaking. You have a lot of questions to answer, he then snapped his fingers. Naruto looked down, to see his hands locked by an ice chain. He smiled. Isn't this a little bit of an overreaction? He could see why Brandish had gone as far as to reject a chance to dine with him. She'd never done that before. Then again, she was a sad child then. He'd been nice and cared for her, as August has. An overreaction would have been having you chained the moment you arrived and then controlling your mind to see if you are still loyal and make you answer some questions, Invul said as he walked towards the others who were standing in a circle. Demaria looked at him with a small smile. It looked like a sinister smile. She was most definitely happy to see him in such a state. Their first meeting hadn't been like this. He'd liked what he saw. But things changed. He hated her rotten personality and she hated his mere presence and loved to see him suffer. Perhaps disliking her was also due to her personality. Naruto shook his head. Irene was cold, but he didn't have a problem with her. From his look, Naruto couldn't tell what August was thinking and he didn't try to think about it. Irene looked at him with cold eyes. Perhaps she was displeased that he had chosen to come here before going to see her. And the new member, well, he just seemed excited for some reason. The atmosphere hasn't changed, except for the children growing. Naruto followed Invul and decided to sit down next to Irene. Sitting is okay. No, General. As long as you answer questions. Naruto settled down gracefully and turned to face God Serena. It was not hard to recognize the man who was once hailed as the strongest in Ishgar. But now he was here. He was not the strongest, he was nothing here, just a shield. What would possess a man to leave the glory of being the top dog in a whole continent to become a mere tool here? He shook his head. Perhaps he was never a good person to begin with. The Magic Council wasn't even ruled by good people. It was all just people who did what they thought, making rules as they go. Sometimes they just made shit up. It was that line that whatever the council painted as black was black. For God Serena to leave the council absolutely made no difference. On the balance of power, Ishgar had lost an asset. It was said that the gap between Serena and the other gods was frighteningly big. But if he went to the other side, it would even things, no. Dragon Slayer. No, you are not a dragon, Naruto said, evening God Serena. You should have stayed in Ishgar. With Agnologia hunting down all those who smell like a dragon, you will surely die if you come across him. God Serena merely grinned. He was not scared of Agnologia. The dragon was a king and he was a god. Kings bowed before gods. Demaria snorted. Says the coward who tugs in a tail between his legs and runs off whenever he sees Agnologia. Naruto tossed his eyes towards Demaria. That look on her face, she was looking down on him. He wanted nothing more than to lunge and lie on top of her. Perhaps she would respect him a bit. You should applaud that fact that I have stood before Agnologia and lived to tell the story, Naruto said. What would you do if you faced him? None of you here have the power to defeat the dragon. He stopped short of telling Demaria that not even Zareth had the power. August would quickly turn on him if he said something so disrespectful. I am confident in my chances, Demaria said in a sharp tone. But what is proven is that you can run fast. I don't know what His Majesty saw in someone as pathetic as you. Despite not being one of us, he permitted you to be here. Sometimes I think you and I shared a bed and I failed to satisfy you, which is why you look at me with such disdain, Naruto said with a slight shake of his head. But one day, I will show you just how awesome Naruto is. We can go now. Well, I'm a little tied up, Naruto said, holding up both his hands. But if you want to get nasty now, I don't mind, we could. Enough. August cut in. Invil, ask him your questions so we can get to it. Where have you been? And why have you been ignoring calls to return to the palace? I know your received messages, I just could never track down your location, Invil demanded, in a stern tone. There, Naruto said with a careless shrug of his shoulders. I'm not the only one who ignores calls, so, there is no need to be questioned. We do not question the others' loyalties. But ever since we halted our plans to invade Ishgar, you have been out of control, Invil said. Out of control? Perhaps he just showed them a little side of himself that he didn't show them before. But before then, there had never been the talk of invading Ishgar. These people had done their fair share of destruction and he had taken part in some of that chaos, but invading Ishgar had been a step a little too far. There would have been too much pain and suffering. War was never a pleasant thing. He had seen it. And these people had no problem in killing others. It would not have been right with him if he allowed it to happen. Are you not going to answer questions? Invil demanded. I can do this the hard way. The reason I refuse to do so is that you have been someone I worked along with in understanding, and I would not be honest to say you have not been helpful in some troubling situations. But I won't hesitate to use force. Naruto turned to Irene, just to see if she would intervene, but the woman just gave him a cold stare, as if daring him to drag her into his mess. He shook his head. What a cold woman, he thought. You've always looked at me with an eye of suspicion, thinking I became a spy for the council. I guess that is never going to clear up anytime soon, the blonde sighed. At this moment, I am with you, I have not betrayed you people. What I do in my free time is not up for discussion. If you want to use force, try it. But know that I won't roll aside. Invil frowned. Naruto did have a tough mental defense. There was just so much about the blonde that he still could not understand. He never seemed bothered by anything, and sometimes when he did, it was just an overreacting, just for theatrics. He glanced at August for approval, and the man gave a subtle nod. Still, Invil didn't free Naruto from the locks that chained his hands. Please leave us, Naruto. Naruto tilted his head to the side before simply floating while in the same position. He flew out of the throne room and the doors shut in behind him. Once out, he settled down and looked at the ice and shaking them off in a simple movement. They just shattered within a second. He closed his eyes and leaned against the wall by the entrance. It is such an unpleasant feeling knowing that you are not trusted, Naruto said to Kurama in a sad tone. Are you kidding me? What, you care about being trusted by those people? Naruto shrugged. We have certain urges that we are not all proud of, he said, but it is good that we are leaving. If things got any worse, they would have suspected us of something. It was long coming, Kurama said. What do you think they are talking there? Despite differences, August had never permitted for you to be kicked out of the place as they talk. What were they talking about it? A lot has been happening over the past couple of years. And not too long ago, Acnologia did make an appearance. They probably didn't know about it since the Magic Council kept such things to themselves. It was ridiculous for the authority in regulating the use of magic. The council had no answer to Acnologia, but the only people actually thinking of defeating the Dragon King were these unkind people. They had their reasons, but it did not take away the fact that they were making plans to deal with the dragon. Time has passed since Acnologia made an appearance. They probably know about it. And even if they do not know anything about it, they probably see the changes with the Grand Magic Games and God Serena now joining them. It is safe to say Ishgar is now weakened, Naruto said. Last year's games appeared not to have been that interesting. We will see how this year's games will be. You plan on going? Of course, Naruto said with a smile. It should be fun if we could go and make an appearance, just for the fun of things. You want the Magic Council to turn on you? Naruto shrugged. The council has nothing to do with the games, he said. Either way, if they don't attack, they will wait for Zirf to return and then try again. But perhaps motives will be different this time around. I don't know, Zirf never told me all things about his past. I only know about End. He then paused. Maybe we could go demon hunting. It isn't like I have a choice in that, Kurama said. Naruto sighed. Fine, we can just be lazy like you until something interesting happens, he said. Irene felt some relief with everything proceeding without Naruto being mentioned and her name not being dragged into it. She was the one to come with him, but it was not her idea to place him into the palace. The Emperor was the one who did. She'd been fine with him being just around her as she understood part of his thinking. The others probably saw no concern with him. They didn't know the extent of his magic, nor have they even seen it. Irene couldn't remember the last time Naruto used his real magic. Within this room, it was her who knew it. August had seen glimpses of it when around the time they tried to invade Ishgar. When she was trying to leave the room, August stopped her. Wishful thinking. When had she become so naive to think that August would not ask questions, especially if he saw what she found in the country? We must talk about Naruto. Irene glanced at Invil. The boy had stood behind. Irene held no relevant thought towards him. Her cold eyes turned towards August. He stared back, unblinking. What is there to talk about? His Majesty told me this 7 years ago. Naruto will eventually leave us, but I hope he does not leave us, August said, much to the surprise of Invil. 7 years ago? He knew the blonde was much older than he looked and actually got along with the Emperor. No, their friendship appeared to be too pleasant at times. But still, if August knew this, why didn't he say anything? Are you going to stop him from leaving? He also told me that if Naruto does leave, he will be useful in a fight against Acnologia, August said. But that had only been when the Emperor was in his sad mood, thinking about dying. Perhaps had changed now. Either way, Naruto was still not someone they could take lightly. If there is someone who must stop him, that is you. He is your responsibility and has always been. I got it. If Naruto ever steps before us to stop the Empire's plans, I will kill him with my own hands, Irene said. Is that all? Invil had a couple of questions regarding Naruto, and Irene was the only person who could answer most of them. Problem was that he could not demand answers from her. Given your very personal relationship with him, will you be able to do it? We should just kill him now if he is going to be a problem. While Irene just gave Invil a passing glance, August gave a response to this. Invil, have you seen Naruto's true magic? You know he knows dragon-slaying magic, but have you ever seen him use it before? Invil had never seen it, not even once. If you asked the blonde if he was a dragon slayer, he would deny it and say he doesn't even know the magic. As far as Invil was concerned, the blonde utilized his stuff to negate most forms of magic. When it came to physical attacks, he could withstand anything. Invil wouldn't even think of trying to contend with the blonde in physical attacks. No, but if it is a concern, then logically thinking, we shouldn't even allow him to leave, Invil said firmly. You can try to stop him if you want, Irene said with a slight wave of her free hand. If that is all, August-san, I will be departing. Irene turned away from the two. She could feel August's cold stare. The aged wizard probably didn't want to face Naruto in here. It would cause massive destruction if the blonde decided to fight back. He usually didn't these days. But that didn't mean he took punches for free, he avoided them. But if they showed clear intentions of trying to kill him, he would openly act against them. August respected Naruto's battle power. At the same time, he didn't think of it as much of a concern that he thought they needed to risk things getting rid of him. Moments earlier, Brandish stopped outside when she saw Naruto leaning against the wall on her right side. He looked like he was sleeping. He could be so carefree at times and never really seemed to think deeply about certain things. She walked towards him and stopped inches away from him. She thought of turning his head small, just for the fun of it, but his eyes snapped open. I can sense that mischievous part of you trying to do something funny, the blonde said with a smile, his face moving closer to Brandish's. Brandish stared for a moment, but she was suddenly pulled away by Demaria. Don't stay too close to the likes of him, you'll get affected by his treacherous sickness. Brandish found this at times amusing. These two always bickered. Naruto was not the person who was usually around, but whenever he was, there was always sparks. What happened between you two? Sometimes you sound like a couple who broke up on really bad terms, she said. Me and him, I'd die innocent than be with him. Naruto smiled. Don't listen to her, Brandish. We were actually lovers at one point, though it only lasted one night. She wanted something serious, and I ditched her. Since then, she has been on a mission to get back at me. She'd probably stab me with her blade if I showed her my back. Demaria glared at Naruto. If it was worth the effort, I'd reject that. She then turned to Brandish. I would be careful if I were you. You'll get hunted down if you become suspect and I won't show mercy. She then activated her age seal, stopping time. Her expression was blank when she faced Naruto. Then, what happened to you? You enjoying showing off your body? What happened? She said looking at the bandages. You also like showing off your body. Naruto then smiled slyly. Not that I don't like the view. I quite enjoy it, he said. I have no problems in stopping to talk to you. Naruto sighed. Why do you hate me so much, Demaria? You know why. I don't think it is fair, Naruto said with a shake his head. I nearly killed myself some time ago. I spent about 6 months to heal naturally without the help of magic. I was playing around with space and time. Because of the nature of my magic that doesn't like me wielding other forms of magic, I ended up getting cut in half. Demaria laughed. You should have stayed dead. Now, That is a little cold, Naruto said. I lost a lot of blood, and had it not been for a clone, things could have been dangerous. It is at those moments that I wished I was immortal. Why didn't you use magic to heal yourself? Naruto raised an index finger. Regeneration comes at a cost of diminishing the life of one's cells. I only handled things that would keep me from dying. My body has already gone through enough punishment, Naruto said. I need more time with Chronos to learn more about time. No, I'm not telling you anything. You are a traitor. You are going to leave, aren't you? Is that what August decided? No, but you never swore loyalty to the Empire and refused to be officially made one of the Spriggan. My answer is no. Hell no. You can try and kill yourself. At least that will save you from being killed by Irene, Demaria said before canceling her magic. She then walked away without saying a damn word. Irene stopped outside the throne room and spoke without facing Naruto. Follow me, she ordered. Naruto smiled at Brandish before turning to Irene. Yes, Your Majesty, he said as he walked towards her. Irene took Naruto into a secluded area in a forest. Her grip on her stuff strengthened as she stood just in front of him. There was no emotion in her eyes. Her stuff glowed red before shooting a point-blank beam of energy that hit Naruto on his bandages head-on. The blast sent Naruto crashing into a tree on his back. He didn't move an inch while planted on the trunk of the tree. He just stared without emotion at the incoming Dragon Queen, unbothered by her desire to inflict pain on him. I told you to come and see me, but you did not, Irene said as she stopped just inches away from him. He wasn't harmed by her attack, not even a little. She placed her claws on his bandaged stomach and dug. This caused a reaction from Naruto as he yelped painfully. I don't like repeating myself or having to do things the way you do them. Naruto gave Irene a pained smile. That isn't completely true, at least the last part. You always do as you please. When was the last time you even stood before Brandish? She was just a child the last time you appeared. Don't mistake our positions, Irene warned Naruto. I can do what I want, but you cannot. Ah, so August had given her the message. Naruto smiled a bit sadly. It was such a sad end to things. Seeing you before coming here did not serve any priority, and besides, I knew you were going to be violent. Irene was silent for a couple of moments before retreating her hand. I did not teach you magic so that you can become this. You are supposed to be useful to me. When a tool stops being useful, you cast it aside. But I cannot cast you aside, your knowledge, your magic, it is all dangerous. I did not intend for you to even be a problem to me. Should I not just kill you here or make you suffer until you learn your place? Naruto matched Irene's coldness, only for a second. He removed himself from the tree's trunk and stood face to face with her, just inches away from her. He could feel her cold breath. That stare that threatened to make his eyes explode. Naruto touched the scar on the side of her stomach. His lips touched Irene's, but she did not respond, she just stared at him. Naruto smiled sadly, but he did not remove his hand from her scar. Fate can be such a cruel thing, he said. But let us correct something. I was never your tool, and you know that. I want to think that our relationship meant more than that. You might want to refuse it, but that is okay. You taught me magic because I asked, and paid the price for it. I only stuck around because it was convenient, and our relationship. But apparently, that doesn't seem to mean anything to you. He stepped back and sat down, leaning against the tree's trunk with one knee raised. Naruto hadn't counted the number of years, but it has been about 10 years since he came to know this woman, and 7 since he arrived at the Empire. Their other members were all just children then. Brandish had grown. She had truly grown well. But her fear of Irene had never grown. She was still a bit of a child. And Demaria, how long? L'arcade was just another person. He'd spoken to him once or twice. But through all these years, Irene was the only person he constantly spoke with. He hadn't been a stray dog when she taught him some magic. Her first thought at seeing him had been to simply murder him. But he had convinced her otherwise. Irene looked up for a moment before glancing down at Naruto. If you leave and become an enemy of the Alvarez of the Empire, I have been told to kill you, and I will kill you. I'm tempted to do it now. Naruto smiled. Well, that isn't going to happen. I can't allow you. Irene narrowed her eyes. For someone who refuses to use his magic simply because he caused a slaughter while out of control, you are awfully confident. I've always been confident. Besides, it was not completely true that he refused to use his magic. You've become weak mentally and a little naive. If you allow yourself to be tormented by killing a couple of people, you'll die soon. Irene said. Naruto smiled. He had his reason for doing things the way he did them, and no one was going to dictate how he did them. Not even a person like Irene or August. Let us say our goodbyes, Irene. I would rather not stay here before Invil sends someone after me. I don't want to make enemies. That is a naive way of looking at things. Just because you left without fighting anyone doesn't mean you are not an enemy. Invil has already planned for your death because he will now view you as a threat to his master, Irene said. Well, that is a little troubling, but not unexpected, Naruto said with a thoughtful look on his face. What did you find? A magic device with a magical mirror. Although there was a barrier protecting the mirror, I managed to put my hand through it and I found a lacrima hidden within it. You have been gathering energy, but not just any energy, but energy from nature. You aren't the reason some mountains dried up, would you? Who knows? Naruto said with a slight shrug of his shoulders. That isn't a problem. Anyone can gather energy as they see fit. He placed his hand on his chest. A black tattoo appeared. There were just strange marks that stretched through his chest into his throat. Irene's eyes scanned through the rune. Naruto called it a seal. It was some fine work that did not escape her understanding. And she could understand some symbols. He had, after all, showed her a bit of this magic. I won't tell you all the uses of this thing, but one thing I developed it for was for storing those lacrimas with natural energy. This becomes my second source of magic, and for any other spell I know, I can use using this energy. However, at my first attempt, there was a bit of an accident, Naruto said, placing his hand on his stomach. Natural energy is potent and not easy to control. An accident occurred, and it exploded, spilling out my guts. I'm all healed now, but I thought the look was much better than the previous one. You are hiding something from me, Irene said. There is also something that I could have found that you are not telling me. Naruto shrugged. Speculation, my queen, he said with a smile. I saw your daughter, by the way. I was quite surprised to see that she was alive. But when I saw her, there was no mistaking her, and she looked like you. It is a pity that though a kind person, her mother is a cold-hearted woman who cares for little. Well, when you have seen wars and lived for this long, you stopped caring for many things. Irene was silent for a moment. Who told you to look for her? I wasn't looking for her, I was looking for His Majesty, Naruto said. But are you not curious even a little? No, Irene said sharply. I do not care that I have a daughter. If I was curious at all, I would have tried looking for her, she said. Liar, Naruto said but didn't push it. Well, a week after I saw her, Acnologia appeared and killed everyone because she was in the presence of dragon slayers. It was in that moment that I lost track of the Emperor. Or maybe he just avoided me. She is dead then. I didn't say that, but it appears so, or maybe not. They disappeared before Acnologia could hit them. It was an interesting magic, but I can't explain it. Either way, you don't care and I'm heading over to Ishgar. Naruto then stood up. You're rather sentimental, aren't you? You nurture that scar to remind yourself of the past. Did you love your husband that much? Or did you feel that betrayed by him? Don't poke into my personal business. Naruto smiled. At one point, I was your personal business, he said. Nothing is everlasting in this world. Well, Irene, it has been a pleasure, he paused. Are you not going to give me a goodbye kiss? He smiled weakly. Or maybe not. Naruto put his bag on his shoulder and walked out of the room. There were no lingering attachments. He hadn't spent many nights here anyway. He'd always found somewhere to slumber, either under a tree within a mountain or another woman's bed. He found Irene sitting on her throne, a former queen sitting on a throne. Perhaps she could never leave out the misery and despair that broke her after her transformation started. Her story was a little sad. But Naruto didn't pity her. Of course, he would have liked to have met her when she was still kind. Life experiences ruin people. Perhaps he found more happiness in being around her because at one point in their lives, they had been prisoners in their own homes, resented for something they were not and misunderstood. He could look at her and say, they were alike. Are you finding it that difficult to leave that even after saying your goodbye? Irene asked him. Naruto smiled. Maybe a little, he made a sign with his fingers. But I must admit, casting away everything is a little difficult. Although you have recently been cold to me, we have had such a long journey and that was before you even met Zareth, the blonde said. Irene could not deny that they have been together for many years. But while Naruto had relieved a little of the loneliness that had kept her company for years while she was secluded in an unholy place, despairing over her loss of her humanity, he had still abandoned her. He had abandoned her when his transformation started to take effect. She hadn't told him of the dangers of the magic she taught him. Maybe a little part of him resented her for not telling him. But he could not cry foul over losing his humanity. He was never human to begin with. It has indeed been a long journey, but even when you say that, you have made the decision to part ways knowing full well that we will become enemies, Irene said, staring at him. Well, I'd always known this day would come, at least after you brought me here, Naruto shrugged with nonchalance. Do you hate me for leaving you alone in that situation? Irene shot Naruto an intense stare. I could ask you the same question. Naruto shrugged. I was never human to begin with, at least not completely. You could say I was somewhere in between. I don't even suffer as much effects of dragon-slaying magic as I claim to suffer. It is something you have always hidden, but I know you don't suffer the same consequences. Your stomach is able to hold any magic without suffering the side effects one would normally suffer, Irene said. I always assumed that it has something to do with that fox, but I didn't question it because it didn't help me. And even if she had asked, he wouldn't have told her. When you are a shinobi, you don't broadcast your abilities for all to see. Keeping your skills hidden is a way to give yourself an advantage in battle. When your opponent knows how you fight and your abilities, they plan for a way to counter you, Naruto said before falling silent. I will miss you. Maybe I will come to visit you sometimes, if things don't become dangerous. It will be fine even if you don't come, I don't need you. Never did. Naruto snorted. When you were miserable hiding from humans, you didn't need me, he said sarcastically. But that could be why you wanted to kill me the first time we met. Either way, nothing else matters anyway. My decision is made, and there is no going back, but before I leave, I must tell you something. What? You know I tell a lot of lies about a couple of things, right? A couple? Irene laughed. That was an understatement. Naruto almost lied about most things about himself. Naruto just smiled. You're making me feel bad, especially when I have come to know so much about you. He paused before shrugged as if something had suddenly hit him. You also lie, and you have lied to me countless of times. But despite it all, I must say, we have been good to each other since we got over the rough start. While she was not happy to admit it, Irene could not deny it. Her miserable life had come to see a bit of light when he came around. There had been someone who could talk to her, someone who didn't want to hurt her. He hadn't cared if she was a dragon or human, he'd simply hung around. Although he had never said anything, Irene had come to know through the look on his eyes that they could understand each other. But at the same time, she had desired to be human. But she could not become. There was nothing she could do to reverse the process. A mad part of her had taught him dragon-slaying magic without telling him the side effects because she wanted someone to be like her. She didn't want to be alone in the misery. What is it that you want to tell me? The reason I don't ever use my dragon-slaying magic isn't because of some self-loathing. I indeed had some regrets after losing control, with your help of course, and then going on to level an entire village, Naruto said in a bitter tone. But I have lost all that sentimentality. I indeed did feel the guilt, but the main reason for not using my magic has been because there has never been a reason to use the magic. When I am on this side, there are no other strong opponents who would force me to fight with everything I have. Irene stared at him for a moment. You make it sound as if you only joined this side to protect yourself while growing stronger, she said. Naruto smiled. I'm not that cunning to think of something like that, he said casually. You insult my intelligence, it is not my intention, your majesty, Naruto said with a salute. My days of being queen of the dragons have already passed. Stop calling me that, Irene said in a sharp tone. Naruto pretended as if he didn't hear anything. When my transformation started, as dragon, I fled from you. And was gone for quite some time. By the time I returned, Zeref had already come upon you and well, I'd already met him along the way. He must have told you, no? Irene shook her head. There wasn't much of talking between him and me at first. He saw me and gave me this form. Of course, he did warn me that I only looked human, but I didn't want to believe it. I learned the hard way, and fell into despair. It was around that time that you returned. Naruto nodded. He then smiled a bit sadly. It was honestly horrible not being able to turn back into normal. But I did not flee because I was afraid of losing my humanity. I stopped being human long time ago, but you already knew that, didn't you? Irene nodded. Although there is some dilution, you have the same energy as that fox. It is most likely that you are connected to it. You do have the same smell after all. I didn't press on it because I have been around you long enough to know that if I forced you to tell, you would end up just lying to me. Besides, it was of no benefit to me. Naruto held out his right hand. Crimson flames started licking his arm. After a couple of seconds, the flames flamed out. Naruto's hand had changed. It was raw energy with claws. Irene stared at it with a wide smile. It was by no means a happy smile but a sick twisted grin. She then burst out into laughter. A dragon, a fox, and a Therion, she said in the cold laughter that echoed through the hall. Fate is truly cruel. You're far from human. Naruto shook his head. Not at all, I'm closer. There are some qualities of human that I still maintain. But I don't want to get on with that. I just wanted to let you know of this little secret that I didn't want you to see back then, he said. But I do hope that a day doesn't come where we have to fight, Irene, or the day you have to fight your daughter, because then, you will realize certain things. Those feelings that made you abandon her instead of killing her will come back. The feelings that made us work will eventually surface no matter how hard you want to deny it. But knowing how things work, A day will probably come where that might just happen and you will have a choice on who lives or dies. Irene stared at Naruto. She didn't want to think about the daughter she abandoned. She didn't want to think about his lectures. He sometimes spoke as if he was the older one. Just leave, Naruto. Naruto shook his head. Was she really just going to tell him to leave just because she didn't want to talk personal issues with him? It isn't a good thing holding on to things, Irene. Says the man who keeps secrets. They don't bother me, but your situation bothers you. Of course, now, it might not be anything because you are ignoring it, but the day that you encounter it, you will have to deal with it, Naruto said in a firm tone. I wish you would freely talk to me about such matters, as it was in the past. Irene smiled. A truly bitter smile. Talk to you? You are leaving, and force me to turn on you. While you hope that the day doesn't come, it will eventually come where we will be enemies, won't it? Naruto did not deny this. Fate was a cruel thing at times. It has never been kind to Irene. It had blessed her with peace and authority and then stripped it all away. She has suffered for centuries, paid the price for the power she gained. Perhaps humans were never meant to gain powers to slay dragons. Magic could truly be a curse at times. Chakra never had such laws. You could bend it any way you could and there would be no curses. He smiled sadly. We will eventually talk, Irene. Maybe in a couple of years, if nothing is happening, I shall retreat to my temple. While strolling aimlessly in a forest, Naruto came to a sudden halt. He leaned against a tree's trunk for a silent moment before sliding down, hitting the ground on his behind. He rested silently, with his left knee raised. He felt so empty. A little bad that'd be bad to leave Irene. No, he felt a bit miserable. But this was how things had to go. He had no moral compass that protested his presence within the empire, but he still had a way of doing things and he would not forget the honor of his naive little days in the shinobi world. He would not throw away the value of life he once held while leading the Hidden Leaf, all for the sake of following a miserable woman. He knew, while Irene did not show it, she was not happy that he was leaving her, again. It had not been in many words, but he grasped the fact that his actions were causing her trouble. He tried to soothe that ache by telling her some things he hadn't not told her, but he wondered if that had been the right call. Was it okay to tell her that? You didn't think about it when you decided to tell her? Kurama asked, with a blank look. It was a thing of the moment. I got a little overcome and decided to tell her, Naruto said with indifference. Well, it isn't like it makes any difference anyway. Kurama shook his head. You'll get us killed one day, he said in flat tone. Where exactly are we going? Are we going back to the temple? We have discussed leaving for Ishgar but we have not selected where precisely, Kurama asked Naruto. I haven't given it that much of a thought, Naruto said. The most important thing is that we are leaving here and will be in Ishgar. You are beyond help. Pity you then since you are stuck with me. If I had any choice, I'd depart. In this world, it isn't like someone would try to hunt me down for my power. Unlike our world, this place is less violent and bloody, Kurama said. But you need to stop being an idiot and think of where we will go. It does hurt when you call me an idiot, you know? Naruto said quietly, but we will think about when we start moving. Kurama shook his head. This carelessness will get you killed and I know you have some ambitions despite telling people you've accomplished everything. You're calling me a liar, Naruto said. He then smiled. Well, everybody lies. No matter how small, a lie is a lie. I think I've gotten grips with the art. I'm not really proud of being a dishonest person. You can still be a shinobi even though you were honest. I made it even when I was naive and mentally handicapped with idiocy. You made it because of me. Kurama was quick to remind Naruto. Your biggest battles have been won because of me. On your own, you were nothing. The only thing notable you did for yourself was learning Senjutsu and mastering your Rasen Shuriken, but your battle against Nagato, the other Bijus, Madara, and Sasuke, your overall victory in the Fourth War, it was my power. If you want me to make you a statue and give you a cup, I will do it. Kurama was just bragging but he was right. He'd never been able to do much by himself. He could blame it on Kakashi and Jiraiya for their failure to teach him anything proper. Well, no matter. That was the past and now I have built myself and managed to learn everything that I could learn. My power still plays a role. Naruto shrugged. You're just trying to keep yourself relevant now, he said before placing his index finger on his forehead. He closed his eyes as the hand glowed green. Let me think about things. We are in the middle of a forest, still within the Alvarez. So, Kurama opened his mouth to protest and voice his annoyance but then shut it. He didn't respond. It was not worth it. August shook his head staring at Naruto's form. The blonde had his eyes closed, sitting with legs folded. He didn't look like he was conscious. He could only describe this as careless disregard for one's health and safety. And to think Invil had once campaigned for this person to join the Spriggan 12. He'd refused, of course. August hadn't understood why then, but now he understood. This was the kind of person who could sleep in the job. Such a flamboyant attitude was not needed for someone who was supposed to protect the emperor. And Naruto's sometimes willy-nilly attitude had reinforced the idea that it had been for the best that he refused to join them. This was not a comrade. They'd shared some common goals. But differences had always been there. He'd never been ignorant of them. The Wizard King held out his stuff and tried to poke Naruto on his forehead. The stuff never reached him. It was blocked by a barrier that suddenly came to life. As expected, August muttered silently. While it was expected, it still didn't provide the ultimate protection. Anything could still happen. Naruto's eyes slowly opened. He blinked a couple of times, wondering just how much time had passed. After a moment, he shrugged. He didn't really care. He was not against time in anything. Besides, it looked as if only a couple of hours had passed. August, Naruto greeted with a small smile on his lips. I didn't expect to see you. Ajil told me of your location. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Given his animosity towards me, I thought he would have been quick to rush here to try to get rid of me. It was safe to say that Ajil was the one person who'd never blink before stabbing him on his back if he ever looked away. Well, maybe Naruto could not blame him. But Ajil had pushed him, and so he had trounced him until August swept into the scene to stop him. I stopped him. He still arrogantly thinks you beat him because you caught him off guard, August said, staring down at Naruto. Who'd yet to move? What are you still doing here? I decided to rest a little bit. I'm a bit drained emotionally. It does appear that even if your physical shape changes, your mind remains that of a human, Naruto explained lightly. I considered that if I stayed here, someone could still find me and then I could see what happens. If someone hunts me down while still here, then I know I must be vigilant when I go to Ishgar. So you don't want us going to Ishgar to fight as you think it might raise tensions between the Empire and Ishgar? August stared as he continued. If not because of orders of His Majesty, we would not be standing here like this. You would have been dead, August said. Naruto smiled. That is a bit cold, he said. Well, coming from a man who was infamous for calamity, it was not. But Naruto knew August full well to understand just how he thinks and operates. You have betrayed us, and in the event that the Alvarez Empire confronts Ishgar, you will pick a side. I assume that is also the reason you have decided to leave, August said. Which is all the more reason I should be killed, Naruto finished for August. Then most certainly, Invil was going to send someone to try to get him killed. Both August and Invil were fiercely loyal to the Emperor. The former had been apparently given an instruction by the Emperor not to attack him. And no matter his thoughts, August would follow the instructions of the Emperor without question. But in the absence of a word, as long as Invil viewed him as a threat, he was going to send people to try to kill him. He was most probably not going to come to face him in person. But His Majesty has cautioned against it. However, if you turn against us, I will annihilate you myself if Irene cannot get it done, August warned Naruto with an intense stare. Hopefully, it does not come to that, Naruto said. That is a naive way of thinking. It will come to that, and His Majesty is aware of it, August's tone was firm. I hope you will stay away from Brandish. She is still young and can be urged to consider things in a different view. It would be a betrayal on her part if she ends up leaving the Empire because of you. I know you care for her, but any attempt to dilute her will be met with force, August said. Naruto raised both his hands. I have no intentions of invoking your anger. I came alone and I shall depart alone, the blonde said. However, I do hope that she still maintains her moral conscience. Some of your friends have loose screws in their heads, she must not become like them. Now, Naruto was confident of his abilities, but he really had no desire to fight August. The man was truly bad news when it came to magic power, and not to mention his bothersome ability to copy magic. For so long, Naruto resisted using magic in front of the man because he didn't want it to be copied. His magic would not be used against him. The only way he was going to fight August would be if there was no other option to fight, and it would have to be a fight to death. That is one area that August clearly agreed with Naruto. People like Irene and Demaria enjoyed tormenting their victims in a distasteful way. Naruto had never enjoyed it. He'd always stopped such madness. Still, August didn't give a response. He turned his back on the blonde and left, but not before offering his parting gifts. If you ever decide to return, you will be welcome, but on certain conditions. I value your power, and I also understand that I probably have not seen its true capabilities, but His Majesty knows. After August left, Naruto slowly stood up and then stretched his muscles. He then turned his back on the Alvarez Empire before walking away with his hands inside his pockets. You've decided where we are going. We will see after roaming around, Naruto answered. I ended up having a rather good dream about some of my greatest days as a shinobi. We're past that and it bears no relevance to today, Kurama said in a flat tone. Of course, Kurama would dismiss that thought like that. Naruto wasn't held back by his past in any way. But we can't go that far from the borders of this country. In his loyalty towards the Emperor, Invil is going to send people after us. It will be best we stay close and encounter them there. That way, if there is a lot, it will not look like Ishgar is fighting with the Empire. You really think they will try again? Naruto nodded. Most likely. They have yet to gain the treasure in Fairy Tail and Zeref has said he needs it. Either way, such a war would only bring chaos and destruction. They must be stopped. You're going to do it alone. Naruto smiled. Are you kidding me? I'd die if I did something like that, he said. Children they are, but they are still strong mages. Well, being around them has made me learn their strength and weaknesses, but it still does not make it simple. If you kill whoever will be sent to you, it might be used against you. We will still do it nevertheless, Naruto said in a firm tone. He would not run away from the challenge. But if they are human, we won't kill them, I will break them. Shatter all their bones until there is a bit of life in them. If it is a demon or Machias, crush them, leave nothing remaining of their existence. Kurama grinned at the thought of crushing opponents. He was not opposed to the idea. He simply enjoyed it when Naruto crushed his opponents. You are quite the sadist. Naruto stopped walking. You dare call me that? Wouldn't Irene have such thoughts? Naruto smiled. Well, you are right, but they deserve pain, don't they? I don't care. I just want to see you crush some insects. It has been long since you stretched your muscles, Kurama said with a foxy grin. Indeed, Naruto's grin mirrored Kurama's. Laughs, bickering, and some people sitting in corners flirting. It was all that Naruto saw as he sat on the bar counter within a hall of a building he occupied. Kurama had his head resting on his paws, while he sat with a barrel of alcohol and some fruits. The alcohol never did anything to him aside from making him go to the toilet to take leaks. Fruits were the only food he enjoyed. He could feel their tastes. But anything else cooked for human standards, Naruto could not stomach that well. How long has it been since he came here? Since he ransacked this building and got rid of those who occupied it to take it for himself. Time was meaningless. But a lot of time had passed since he came here. No one came to visit. He would have even prepared a dish for a meal if even some sick psychos come here. And that was simply because he was growing a little tired of waiting for Invil to make a move. Ah, we never had such free time outside of the temple, Naruto said to Kurama. The Biju didn't open its eyes as it responded. I'm content with this. That is because you have always been alone most of your life. Even when sealed, you spent time sleeping and trying to escape your imprisonment, Naruto snorted. Well, I can't say I am bored. We are still waiting for movement from those people. And you have always had people around you, Kurama said sarcastically. Ouch. You know to hit where it hurts, my friend, Naruto said, rubbing his chest. Kurama opened one eye and then closed it again. You have a guest. Naruto looked up to the entrance as the double doors opened. Zeref walked in all his glory. He smiled seeing the black wizard. Zeref looked around for a moment before shaking his head. Was it out of loneliness or just boredom? No. The blonde was not the one to suffer from loneliness. He did have a partner after all, and there was always something to talk about. Your illusions are improving, Zeref said before stopping not far away from Naruto. He sat atop of a table, facing the blonde. Naruto shook his head. Not quite, he said before snapping his fingers. Everything disappeared. The hall was just empty. There were no people, just him and Zeref. Naruto stared at the man who was with no doubt the greatest wizard to have ever lived. Looking at it, there was no one who understood magic better than Zeref. He created demons, there were books he had written. But that thirst to learn magic, to peer into the secrets of life, it had been founded on the purpose of restoring the life of his younger brother. Love was truly something else. It could drive men into the depths of hell. Zeref did all he could because he loved. But simply because the heart loved did not justify the actions. His morals may have become corrupted and he would not blame the transformations he has been forced to go through. It was simply evolution. Only a god could remain the same even after centuries of living. But he had a human heart. Or at least he constantly told himself it was human to escape the despair of losing something vital to happiness. Even though he has lost some moral values, Naruto still knew what was right and wrong. At times, he just didn't care enough to follow it. What would even happen if Zeref knew that August was his son? Naruto thought it laughable that Zeref could not tell. It was ridiculous that the mage could not see something in front of him. No, it was his mindset and the nature of his magic that gave him that thought. He believed he was cursed, unable to form a family. Perhaps he would love his son if he knew. Naruto was not going to say anything. It was not any of his business to say. This is all just illusions to fill my mind with voices. I cannot employ something like this in battle, Naruto answered. I wonder how powerful illusions have to be for you to consider them as such, Zeref said in thought. They must be strong enough to fool your senses, and realization must not be what sets them out. Well, I have always been mediocre at best when it comes to complicated things, and casting illusions of such degree has proved to be difficult. I have so given up on them, Naruto said with a sigh. It isn't like I need to employ them anyway. Zeref smiled. Perhaps in the past it must have been true, but the current Naruto understood magic. But like him, this was forced because of his desire to change something. Did you leave just to sit here, playing guild with yourself? It seems rather sad, he said. I don't need to hear that from you, Naruto responded sharply. I went to Tenro Island to see you but you left without seeing me. I was hurt that you would just avoid me like that. It was not the right time to talk to you, Zeref said with a slight shrug, but since you have now left, it is best to talk to you. Naruto was silent for a couple of moments. He was a little surprised that Zeref already knew about this. Yet, it didn't make any difference. Zeref was not going to attack him now. He couldn't see that intent. He was simply here for something else. Then why have you come here? I was merely passing by to let you know of a couple of things now that you have left. You understand war games, and have gained knowledge about my shields. Zeref said. You are still sitting here because you were waiting for someone to attack you. And the attack will come. But that isn't the reason I stopped by. Naruto frowned slightly. He really didn't want to hear what Zeref had come to see with him. Why did you tell August not to fight me? Zeref smiled. Such a fight would have surely caused the others to get involved and it would have put my Alvarez in danger. I don't want to lose men now. August would not have fought you without using his best abilities that would only bring destruction. He is the one who thinks highly of you, Irene of course. But I don't think she is in a position to fight you earnestly given your shared history. And yet you are going to stand and watch someone attack me. Anyone else I can afford to lose, but August the First cannot lose. Compared to the others, he is on a different level, Zeref said. You should know that. Besides, I want to see you fight, while meaning it. It is not a declaration of war. For now, we can just enjoy ourselves but a time for war will come, and I will see you fight earnestly. Perhaps before I engage Acnologia, you can entertain me. Naruto stared at those dark eyes of Zeref. It was indeed a little frightening. There were no good intentions from the eyes of Zeref. He was right to leave. And Zeref was simply telling him that they would battle in the future. He was not doing anything now because he probably wanted to keep things a bit fun in the near future when he does decide to declare war. Naruto grinned. I plan to enjoy myself, he said. In war, knowing your opponents is a fundamental principle. This is the same principle you applied. I have applied the same principle as well. I know your forms, your magic. Naruto was silent. Perhaps getting help from Zeref had not been the best option. There had been no other way nevertheless. Not even Irene could solve her own problem. But Zeref probably knew more than he let on. After all, there were some things that he told him that he didn't even tell the shields. Your shields, they're just tools, aren't they? Zeref did not respond to this. He just smiled. How many years has it been? Decades. Naruto shrugged. Yes, maybe. I don't think time really matters for someone like you. You are immortal, age does not kill you. Whether you close your eyes for 100 years or minute, it makes no difference. I guess their only lingering attachments you hold is with Mavis, and if she is alive, she will remain so. He closed his eyes. What is the point of the question? Zeref raised an index finger. I helped you out when you needed help, and I welcomed you to my empire when I knew you would eventually leave, because you have no attachment in this world. But in all my years, I have only known you as simply Naruto. Quite honestly, I wonder if that is even your real name. Of course, I cannot ask Irene. Her relationship with me is very different from the relationship you share with her. That is because she is simply a subordinate to you. Our relationship is much more personal, of course. It has not been like that for the past years. You came to her life and became a companion, and then suddenly departed from her without saying another word. You know exactly why I left. She would have died had I not left her presence, and you should be thanking me for because had you not met me, you would not have gone to her and you would not have gained a powerful shield. She joined me because I helped her, Zeref said with a shrug of his shoulders. Naruto Uzumaki, if you had asked her, she would have told you, my past is my past, aside from what I have already shared with you. Naruto said before bringing his legs on the counter. He lay on the side, his elbow touched the counter, resting his head on the palm of his hand. I met Anna, disappointedly. She doesn't like me very much, and thus I could not get out much from her. But I know she is from the past, along with the Dragon Slayers, including you brother. Well, that was as much as I could get from her. Anna is a kind person, and you don't exactly give off a kind scent. Your very being reeks of malevolence, but you have managed to tone it down a bit, Zareth said with a smile. When I asked about how many years, I wasn't simply about your name, but I wanted to ask, are you immortal like me? Dragons don't live eternally, but they live a long life, by human standards. But you were not completely human before your transformation, partial transformation, at least. Naruto was silent for a long moment, his expression became blank. Who knows? But I can be killed, although due to being one with Kurama, he was most likely to revive again. It was not something that he could share with anyone. That is why I have never considered fighting Acnologia. This is interesting, Zareth said. While you ignore my inquiries over what you keep from your subjects with regards to your past, you aren't looking at the future but the past. Do you really want to face Acnologia? I don't know, you are immortal, yet cannot even try. Acnologia is too powerful, Naruto shrugged. I know, but he cannot kill you. That is what frightens me, Zareth said, but you are still powerful. Unlike me, you have no fear for Acnologia, not even a little. You're a dragon slayer, and yet stand before him without any shred of fear. My intention has always been to talk to him, but he doesn't appear to think that highly of me. Then again, it is better that way. If he thought highly of me, he'd never leave me to my devices, but would hunt me down even if I escaped from him, Naruto answered with indifference. I wish we could continue, but I must leave. And in case you were wondering, the fairy tale mages did survive. They're just still trapped somewhere but they will eventually return. Well, you did not come here crying saying no one can now kill you, so, I assumed your brother must still be alive. Zareth just smiled. We will meet again, soon or maybe not. If we don't meet again to talk, we will meet at war. Naruto closed his eyes and when he opened them, Zareth was gone. Kurama opened a single eye and then spoke. Regardless of how you look at it, that was troubling. Naruto nodded. But it was Zareth and Naruto didn't want a war now. He didn't want to be the one to have started war. History remembered in his happy days as the one who stopped a war, a hero of war. He would not be the one who ignited the flames of war. But still, Zareth was rather cold. He led his empire into darkness and they could not see it. Naruto still would not say it. It was not his business. And if it was war, he would fight it without questions. But the fact that Zareth knew things that he liked to keep secret meant that the future was not going to be as easy as he liked. Well, no matter, he still had his aces. He hoped the trouble would not come before they have found a way to separate Kurama from his being. And then he could restore the Biju. But as things stood, there was no other way he could think about, not unless there was some wish-granting genie. Indeed, Naruto said, but one had to expect as much from Zareth. His knowledge of magic is unrivaled. What now? What now? Naruto couldn't think of anything aside from facing the challenges Invil was going to send to him. It was good since it would not invoke war. He was a little bored anyway. He could use the exercise. Crushing a clone was not fun but an opponent who wanted to kill him was a little exciting. We wait for the enemy to come, Naruto said. Once that is done, we can move out. Maybe we will first go look for a place that has the best ramen and then go back to the temple. What is the use? You can't even tell how it tastes like. Who is to blame for that? Because of you, I always feel lazy and can sleep for a whole month. And that is just your laziness and your lack of need for food. Your nourishment comes from natural energy, what are you complaining about? Kurama asked. You were dying, and so was I. The only choice for survival was for me to pump my chakra into your system. I didn't think that it would reshape things. And I also didn't account for part of my body to be taken away to strengthen you so that could survive the physical stress of being dragged to this world. And yet you still managed to keep a body. A pathetic body that needs to be sustained by magic or else it disappears. And I cannot even go far from you, not mention, I cannot gather energy on my own. I am like a stillborn child, I can only eat when inside of you. Kurama said in a hardened tone. The one possibility that neither wanted to think about was if there was no other way to reverse the process. Well, being gloomy about it doesn't solve much, Naruto said with a yawn. We can't just sit here and wait. We may as well just slumber. Boom. Missiles hit the building Naruto was within without warning. The entire building went out in flames after the missiles hit. It all crumbled down as a large amount of debris picked up. The birds within the surrounding trees chirped, as they flew away to safety. When everything died down, within the debris Naruto was sitting in a meditative position, eyes closed. He was unharmed despite the building being reduced to ruins. When he opened his eyes, he looked around and then sighed. So much destruction for nothing. Someone could have just knocked and he would have woke up. There definitely had been no need to destroy this building. He sighed, oh well, it was not his home or anything. He just hijacked it anyway. One day, you are not going to wake up from your sleep, Kurama said to Naruto. And someone will just kill you on your sleep. Naruto thought about it before laughing. It would be humiliating. No different than a shinobi missing a target he was supposed to hit because he overslept. How do you even return home because of such an embarrassing failure? He did often end up sleeping for long periods in areas where someone could find him. He blamed Irene for this. Before he came upon her, he'd always rested on places far away from humans. Then again, he'd always been leaking the killing intent that just frightened all those who became its victims. All the more reasons we should get a spare body and keep this one locked away, Naruto said. You can't enchant yourself to another person. We have already tried this and the body was unable to contain us, Kurama said. Naruto couldn't even do enchantment of that level. Irene had helped in the last attempt. Thinking about it, Naruto frowned deeply. It was just like with Orochimaru, and to think he'd end up going to a similar path. How the mighty has fallen from grace. We just need a strong body, preferably that of a demon, Naruto said in thought. There are many demons around. Hunting them shouldn't be a difficult task, but I am not too interested in gaining a demonic body. You are contradicting yourself. Not at all. What I am saying is that a demonic body is strong. Anything like it could contain us. But at the same time, being a demon is not what I want. You are already a demon. By the standards of this world, I am a demon, Kurama explained. Just as I influenced you when you were still in your mother's womb, when I saved your life, my chakra changed your body. Naruto chose to ignore the first words. Have I even thanked you yet for saving my life? No, you ungrateful fool. But I don't need your thanks. I didn't do it for you. I did it to save my life, Kurama said in a flat tone. Naruto did not respond. He looked ahead and saw the robotic figure standing in front of him. He smiled. I expected someone else, but I guess a machine can still be made if you have the scraps for recycling it. You know I cannot be recycled. Naruto stared for a moment before shaking his head. This world surely had its strange things. There were such things as gods. Demaria had one within her. But remarkably, such a thing called God could still be defeated. This was also an alternative universe, and a race of Machias. Where is the real wall? If I am going to have to do this, I would rather not waste my energy destroying a mere puppet when the real one is not even close enough. The puppet smiled. You think you can defeat me? I have been sent to deliver judgment on someone who has betrayed the emperor. Justice does not lose. He smiled. I must admit, you are a little complicated as I cannot view your body. A barrier? If he had been smarter in his younger days, if he had grown within the Uzumaki clan, he would have developed such measures around his body using Fuinjutsu to block the sight of Dujutsu that liked to peek on other people. Ah, well, he could blame his sad need for attention and affection for never learning much. Knowledge was important in making informed decisions. But to simply have knowledge didn't mean wisdom. That came with age and the ability to think logically. Even geniuses could make fundamentally flawed decisions. Such people tended to be emotionally weak and sometimes blind to simple things because they were always looking toward complicated solutions. Shall we treat this as a training exercise? Naruto wondered out loud. The principle of a shinobi is that you must never show your opponent your weaknesses. If possible, deceive them. There was also a saying that there is no honor amongst shinobi. In the way we fight, of course. But I never followed that. I was always honest and displayed great honor. He was still honorable, but it didn't mean he didn't deceive his opponents. Being too goody would cost him his life. There were many scenarios in which he could have died because of his naivety. He had to always thank Kurama. In the battle in the snow, with Sasuke, it was always Kurama who bailed him out. Without the Biju, he was just a stupid brat with large chakra reverse. Sage mode did help him, but it still didn't take away his obvious flaws. Age and experience were truly the best teacher. He closed his eyes, and when he opened them, Wall's puppet had about 25 Machias behind it. They all looked ready for battle. He smiled. They were machines, not flesh and blood. He would not have trouble breaking them apart or even blowing them up to pieces. Last words. I really didn't dislike you. You were a fair person after all, but I must pass down judgment, Wall said, holding out his right hand. A bulky missile formed just above Wall and then shot toward Naruto. The blonde watched the missile without moving. His trained eyes calculated its movements as it headed straight at his chest. It was one of those missiles that exploded on contact with the target. When it was just inches away from him, time seemed to slow down as Naruto did a 90-degree spin. It all happened in a flash. The missile just went past him, a little behind him. Oh my! Naruto exclaimed with a small grin. The missile was once more turning toward him. It was locked to his heat signature, he realized. So, it was not going to stop until it hit something. A machine lunged at him from his right side with the missile coming in from the left. The clone's outstretched fist was sparkling with electricity. Naruto ducked under the punch while stretching out both his hands. the left up and he right toward the machine's chest. He twisted slightly to face it before grabbing the stretched hand around the elbow. The palm of his right hand touched its chest. He straightened up and in some fluid, flashy movements, he turned around to face the missile before hurling the machine into it. Boom! The machine collided with the missile and then exploded. The missile turned it into small pieces of metal scraps. Nagato did have the ability to make such weapons through the Rinnegan. How I wish I could also do it, Naruto said in thought. He turned his attention to the machines with his head tilted to the side. There were a handful of them, and he really just wanted to remove pieces of them. They were not human. There would be no blood. He did wonder if the Machias race actually felt pain. Shaking his head, Naruto took out his stuff. I can play around the puppet and wall himself, but the others are only good for target practice, not to mention, the more I fight these things, the more wall steadies my fighting style. I would not make something which could be easy to be very difficult, Naruto said to himself. You oddly become very smart when fighting, Kurama noted. Haven't I always, when you were not fighting for some stupid reason? I never fought for stupid reasons, Naruto rejected the assertion in a firm tone. Well, he grinned, no matter, let us go wild. I also want to test that curse I learned. Don't do anything stupid and expect me to bail you out. You couldn't even if you wanted to. While annoyed by the way Naruto said those words, Kurama still responded but with a bit of edge in his tone. That is my point exactly. Naruto just shrugged and then dashed toward the machines. They didn't just stand and allow him to come to them. They also started charging toward him in their numbers. The first to reach him jumped up into the air, jumping over him. As it did, another lunged below, driving a fist encased with electricity toward his chest. The machine above him flipped, moving behind him. Incinerate. Naruto mouthed the curse and the machine in front of him burst into crimson flames. Before the machine behind him could land on the ground, he did a quick jump and flipped, turning upside down just above the burning machine. He placed both his hands on the machine's shoulders. With great force, he pushed to the other. The force was so much that the machine it hit stumbled back as it caught the fire. While still upside down, Naruto suddenly disappeared into thin air. He flashed front of one of the machines, holding out his stuff. He swung it down, aimed at the machine's right shoulder. The stuff cut through the shoulder, breaking the arm. Naruto didn't stop there. He drove his left hand straight towards its chest, burst through it. When another machine appeared behind him, Naruto twisted around, anti-clockwise. His stuff smacked the machine straight on its head, bursting it. He then jumped up, and watched the machines for a second before disappearing once more. He appeared right behind the machines, the tip of his stuff pointed at them. It was glowing light blue. Erase. A massive blast of energy was released from the stuff. It spread out wide quickly, and engulfed the machines. Everything the blast touched became non-existent. Only the lower parts of the machines remained, before falling down harmlessly. Naruto didn't get to admire the work of his curse. He was forced to jump into the air when a huge explosion of electricity occurred. A vital point in battle would be to never lose sight of your opponent, Wall's puppet said as it flashed just above Naruto, trying to chop him from behind. If you are going to do a sneak attack, at least be silent about it, Naruto responded as he tilted his head to the right, his stuff facing the puppet's hand. He did this without turning to face the puppet. Erase. Another blast flashed out in the blink of an eye. It hit the puppet's hand, erasing it within a second. The puppet immediately wheeled away from the blonde. When it landed on the ground, it was forced to twist around as Naruto was already there, his stuff pointing at it. It was a little underwhelming, Naruto said. I've even lost interest in this little exercise. Your emperor has also said no war, and if I destroy you, it gives those people some reason to try to make things a little bothersome for me. I really want to just relax while amusing myself before war. So, I won't come after you, Wall. However, as principle, this thing must be erased. Not before I erase you first. Boom. A powerful explosion denoted as the puppet exploded in self-destruction. The explosion caused everything to be blown into the air, causing a large crater on the ground. When everything died down, Naruto stood still, with a frown on his lips. His coat was burnt away, but he was fine. My coat, he cried sadly. We must go to Invil and demand that he compensate for a replacement, he said firmly. Of all things you were worried about your coat. What else should I worry about? If harm is going to come to me, it has to be from the real Wall, Naruto answered in a flat tone. This is my original body, it is going to take more to actually damage it. Not to mention Irene had enchanted it shield me, it absorbed most of the damage. You are not being attacked. Kurama took Naruto through what was important. He didn't stop because you said you would let him leave. If the real Wall was here, then he had simply been using the puppet to see your reaction and maybe if you would cause problems for them. You thought Zarif was willing to sacrifice one of his, but that is wrong, at least not now. Are you saying my deduction was wrong? No, Kurama responded sarcastically. Are we finally going to leave now? Naruto adopted a thoughtful look for a moment before nodding his head. I must send a clone to see Irene about something that arose when I was with Zeref? You want to sow seeds of mistrust between her and the Emperor? Kurama asked. It was the only thing that could have possibly come up. Naruto had always suspected, but he'd never been able to confirm it. That Zeref kept many details to himself about his intentions. I'm not that manipulative, besides, I doubt I can manipulate Irene. Kurama snorted. She is a miserable woman with too much pain. You relieved some of that, but it hasn't made her a good person. To my disappointment, she came to know Zeref because of me, Naruto said. Had things been different, we could have had a different future. But I just want to see how much she knows and if I can open her eyes. You don't need to go to her. You can just call her. I doubt she'd come. You underestimate your influence to her. You are the only person who knows her and has experienced what she has experienced. You were with her in her moment of loneliness. Even if you left her, she has not forgotten, Kurama said with a slight shake of his head. Naruto thought about it for a moment before nodding. He put away his stuff and then held out his right hand. A bird appeared in a puff of smoke. Call Irene to come to see me at my home. The transformed clone nodded and then flew off. Irene would have to see the place he used as his base of operations, his comfort place. At least he could trust her to keep the location a secret from the others. It was warded with barriers to keep people away, but you never knew what could sneak in. Are you sure you want to give her the location? Naruto nodded. It is a sign of trust, and what I should talk to her regarding should make it obvious that all I want is for her to be happy. I hope your attitude does not get us killed one day. Irene stared at what she could only call a temple. The structure was huge, trying to reach the clouds. 6 stories of floors appeared not to have an entrance. There were no windows, no doors, just bricks piling up after each other, with each floor smaller than the floor below. There was a staircase that led up. There was also a dark cloud that hovered about. You definitely could not miss the building from afar, yet not anyone had seen it, and it was still within Ishgar. She frowned at the thought of climbing all the stairs. She could turn into a dragon and just fly. Shaking her head, Irene walked to the stairs. After both her feet touched them, the stairs glowed with strange marks before they started moving up. There was a bit of dust as they moved. It looked as if they hadn't moved in years. It took a couple of minutes before she reached the top. The area was wide and open. The pillars holding up the roof were painted in gold. On the other side from where she came, there was a throne, located on a small stage. Irene turned around to look at the surrounding of the place. Despite being high up, she could only feel a slight breeze. There was something blocking the wind. She walked toward the edge. There was nothing but dead land surrounding the palace. There was no mountain, nothing, just boulders sticking up lifelessly from the ground. Even the air was thick. There was definitely something wrong about this place that seemed to distort the atmosphere. How has no one found this place? It looked to be a century old given its structure. It laid in the middle of a desert and still no one has seen it. She had been brought here, by a clone. She couldn't even give the exact location of this place. Irene turned away from the edge and walked toward the throne. The moment she touched the stairs leading to the throne, something moved which caused her to halt, but the person sitting on the throne didn't move, not a bit. 3 walls from the left, right and behind the throne shifted from the floor until touching the roof. There was a bit of darkness that lit up. It was however lit brightly by 6 orbs of energy that floated above the throne. They were the same lacrima that she had seen in his device. You're awfully comfortable, Irene said, glancing at Naruto's feet. The fox laid there, eyes closed. Wasn't it always sleeping in her presence? Naruto smiled. This is my home, should I not be comfortable? But I must admit, I hadn't been here since I met you. Irene's right brow stretched up a bit. Why? Look around you. There is no life. This place sucked it all dry. There is no human close by. Nothing that lives. During day, the sun becomes so hot, any human would simply pass out of dehydration. I'd abandoned this place when I met you. Someone I could speak with on equal terms, someone who understood pain and loneliness. Why would I want to come back to this place? You came back here, Irene said. Circumstances force me to return, Naruto said with a slight wave of his right hand. I just want to sleep for maybe 2 years or more. Nothing is happening now anyway. Irene was silent for a couple of seconds, her eyes lingered on the blonde without blinking. What are you really doing here, Naruto? There is a lot of magic in those things, and I guess you are the one who ruined this place. She said, looking up at the glowing orbs above him. I'm sadly trying to solve a problem that I have been trying to solve for about a century now. In fact, my learning of dragon-slaying magic took me back to square one. The effort I'd put in for a period that was long enough to be the entire lifespan of a normal human, it was all ruined. Irene did not miss the fact that Naruto appeared angry. When had she seen him angry? Almost never. He had always seemed calm, never serious. While still thinking about this, that anger in his eyes seemed to disappear as he sighed. Is that why you left? Naruto just smiled. Stories of the past, he said. But let me correct you about one thing or two. I did not destroy what I destroyed because I lost control. Well, technically I did lose control, but I was angry at my loss. I want to be human again, Irene. I miss the feeling of hunger, and the desire to eat meat and still feel what it tastes like. I want to care about some things, I want to be normal. When I sleep, I usually put a timer because I might just sleep and wake up a year later. Irene smiled, a bitter smile. You should hate me. Not at all. While here, I was roaming the world in a clone. I did not have friends, avoided people. I was truly alone. You gave me companionship and made me realize what it means to be alive. To know that you are alive and you must enjoy this life, for me, that was much more valuable than any research. I could have worked out a method by then, but I would have become so lifeless that nothing no longer mattered. But you matter. The friends I have made matter. I'm interested in life because of you. Not all was lost anyway. I have many years to live to make corrections. Naruto smiled. I'm a little relaxed because of you. I'm not in a hurry like I will die tomorrow. I thank you for everything, in fact. I'm glad to have been of service, Irene said. Did you call me here to tell me that? Naruto shook his head. I wanted you to see this place. And I also spoke to Zarif. It was speaking to him that actually led me to conclude that I should rest my body here in the meantime as nothing is happening. I have 2 questions, you need not answer them. Did you know that Zarif only met you because I spoke to him before he came across you? What is your emperor's greatest desire? Hint, it is not to defeat Acnologia. Naruto smiled. Be aware of where you stand and whom you fight for, because at the end of the day, it is you who matters. One more question, what is it that you live for, Irene? My questions have no ulterior motives. And you can think about them at your time. I'll tell you this, I want you to die with a smile, because I have grown to love you. Irene's eyes snapped toward the direction of the voice. The blonde was standing away from the crater. He had avoided her flames. And her first strike didn't seem to have done damage to him. Who wouldn't attack you with such a menacing feeling? Naruto smiled. Weak people, he said. It cannot be helped. My dominant magic is pure hatred. But I've been working to clean it, he said. You'll forgive me for sneaking up on you. My name is Naruto. I've been traveling around Earthland for a number of years now. Irene did not give a name. She did not introduce herself. What do you want? Will you come down? Irene stared down. She was hesitant. She didn't know if she should. The smile he had was an attempt to soothe things, but her senses still sensed danger. I mean no harm. I just want to talk to you. You seem rather lonely here, but so have I. What do you know about that? Naruto smiled sadly. You are a dragon and yet attacked me just seeing me. What do you think humans do when they see me? Everyone is frightened of my presence, and so, I live alone. It was a sad living. To be able to walk around into human towns, he had to transform into a clone. That way, nobody ran off. It was just like the old miserable days in the Hidden Leaf. It was laughable just how he was forced to live this kind of life once again. After a moment of thinking, Irene descended to the ground. But she still kept a safe distance. Naruto did not close it. When she didn't say anything, Naruto settled down under a tree, leaning against its trunk. It is fine if you don't want to talk. For now at least. I haven't slept over the past month due to many things I've had to do, Naruto said with a yawn. I hope you are not going to try to kill me again while I sleep. In fact, I'm hoping you'll watch over me as I sleep. Just like that, he fell asleep. She'd thought he was joking, but after 6 hours, even contemplated killing him while he was asleep, Irene decided to just ignore him. How careless was he to sleep before her after she just tried to kill him? Shaking her head, she rested, but with one eye open. After a couple of more hours, both eyes closed. When she woke up, Naruto was lying on his back, eating grapes. She blinked but said nothing. She didn't even ask where he got them. Irene knew that the only reason Zarif had summoned her was to talk about Naruto. This had nothing to do with his recent visits to the Empire. She has remarkably never discussed with Zarif, despite the fact that they have been around for much longer. Zarif never asked, and she never spoke about it. When she arrived outside, at a balcony, overlooking the streets of the capital city, she found the Emperor standing alone, watching the streets. Irene carried her stuff firmly and walked towards the man. The air was warm. Not that she enjoyed such things. Naruto was the one who could sit to enjoy a cool breeze. She did not. She didn't care about such small things. Irene stood by his right side, looking down the streets. Without looking at her, Zarif started speaking. Not long ago, this place was not like this. There was but hundreds of guilds spread around this country. You, Naruto, and August assisted me in subduing all those guilds to form my empire. And today it has become what it is. You did not call me to talk about history, have you, Your Majesty? Irene asked, a stern look on her eyes, tossed to the side for Zarif to see. The Emperor merely smiled. Irene has always been a little serious, but when she had received this form, she had been a little giddy like a child. The despair of reality had hit her hard and turned her into this person. But Zarif could not blame her. He too had fallen into despair at one point in his life. No, his life was a tragedy. There were many things that went wrong. Everything went wrong. No, Zarif started with a slight shake of his head. I called you because I wanted to talk to you about Naruto. His location to be precise. I have not seen him in the last couple of years. Nor have I, Irene responded. That place Naruto had shown her was at a place she could not narrow down. But she knew it was probably within this continent, or maybe even in Ishgar. Either way, Irene was not too bothered by it to actually spend time trying to figure out where it was. It was not like Naruto had disappeared forever. He was going to show up again when he felt like. He didn't work on anyone's schedule. Trying to tie him down was a simple waste of energy. If you wanted him to sit at a place, it better be a hole somewhere he could just sleep without care in the world. But I am surprised that you'd ask me, Irene said. Your relationship with him seems to reach bounds that none of other Spriggan can reach. Not that she has seen it, but Naruto did always give that idea that he knew a lot about Zarif. And some of the things he has whispered to her made her ask questions. Still, she was loyal to the Empire. Naruto was not the kind of person you could trust. Not when he could just disappear at any moment. He seemed to relish the idea of playing hide and seek. He didn't care about anything else but was set on his wants. Who else would I ask? Wouldn't you know? Though he is never forthcoming, I sometimes think he met you before we met. Zarif shook his head and gave Irene a stare. Naruto had probably said something to her. He could entertain it, but that was not the reason he'd called Irene. Besides, it was given that Naruto would eventually say something to Irene. But given the blonde's motives, there wasn't much he was actually going to say, and Zarif was content with that. I am asking you because you are the one who knows him better. If he is going to admit to something, it has to be to you. Did Irene have any intentions of betraying the Empire? No, she had no such intentions, at least not for Naruto's sake. He always knew what he was doing. Irene was not going to defend him. But from how things looked, it did seem like Zarif only wanted Naruto just so they could speak, not for war. There were no preparations for war on this side. He is at a temple somewhere, I don't know the location, Irene said. Is that all? General location? Ishgar, it has to be somewhere away from humans. It is not in an island. Zarif nodded. What do you know about Naruto? His origins to be precise? Nothing. I don't know anything, just that he was once a leader of a village, and that he has a troubled childhood. The details are always vague. He is consistent in keeping that part of his life hidden away. Irene said. Memories of the old seemed to be something of a touchy subject. At one point, he seemed to have this miserable look on his eyes when he spoke about his childhood. There was pain, but he didn't share it with anyone. Which village? In which country? In which year? Zarif asked. I have searched around, trying to look for his origins, but found nothing. Nothing. Has he even aged in the past 20 years? Irene was silent. Naruto had not aged. Her human form was now mature. But the only thing that seemed to grow with Naruto was his hair. His face seemed eternal. She could put him in the same bracket as Zarif. The thought made her frown. Was Zarif suggesting that they were the same? Naruto had denied immortality to her when she asked him. He has not, but neither have you aged. Naruto is different from me. His body at least. Irene was not going to share any more than that. But if you are suspect to something, would it not be better to ask him rather than me? He could have even lied to me. I also find your questioning very curious. Zarif waved his right hand. I know Naruto isn't like other dragon slayers. I also don't think Naruto would lie to you over such things. He would rather not tell than lie. He tilted his head to the side. That has been his method, am I not correct? Who knows? I have never known what that man is thinking, Irene said, turning away from Zarif. Ouch! Naruto cried after Kurama scratched him across his face. What was that for? He demanded, glaring at the Biju. Kurama glared back. He'd been trying to wake the blonde up after sensing a presence coming towards them. Unlike with Naruto, he wasn't dead when asleep. We have a situation, he said. Naruto looked up for a moment before standing up. He could sense Acnologia's presence. He frowned slightly. The only reason the Dragon King would come here would be for battle. He has never shown any interest in talking to him before. He had been certain that this place was fairly hidden. Then again, Acnologia was the only who flew above the clouds. He could see such a place. Or maybe someone like Zareth had let it slip just to see how he would react to this. Naruto sighed, and leaned back to his throne. How troublesome, he said casually. I can sense the killing intent even from here. It seems this time, Acnologia is hell-bent on trying to destroy us. And you're just going to sit there? Of course not, but panicking isn't going to solve anything. It will just make us resolve things hastily, and that might give us a problem, Naruto said in a thoughtful tone. What was he to do about this? He truly had no intention of fighting Acnologia, at least not now. The dragon was not going around to destroy villages and causing chaos. There was no pressing reason to invoke a battle to death with the dragon, even just for amusement. It was best not to get the Dragon of Apocalypse excited about the thought of fighting him. He tapped his fingers on the armrest and decided. This temple has served its purpose, but if it gets destroyed, we can always rebuild it, Naruto said as he stood up. You are not going to run as you always do. Naruto looked down at Kurama with a raised brow. You sound like you disapprove of my methods and are holding down the excitement of fighting Acnologia. Kurama displayed a toothy grin. I don't deny that I want to fight the dragon. In our world, I was the strongest, but in this world, the dragon is the strongest. It offends me a little. Naruto laughed. In that form? He asked with a stare. You have certainly lost your body, but your pride has not gone away. You must accept that you are no longer the big bad nine-tailed demon fox and have become just a tiny little fox. One day, I will regain my strength, and you will regret this mocking, Kurama swore. Naruto smiled. Well, that day is not now, and we are not worried about such. In any case, I can enjoy myself, he said before standing up. His muscles were tense. He stretched up a bit and then took out his stuff. It became engulfed in blue flames before revealing a pure black long sword with a crimson handle. Naruto pointed the tip of the blade on the lacrima orbs floating above him. He seemingly cut through the space, creating a pocket. One by one, the orbs were absorbed into the pocket. Naruto then closed it by doing the same motion. His sword became a stuff once more. That is about any valuable thing we have outside. Everything else is sealed away underground, Naruto said before walking away from the throne. Kurama jumped on his shoulder as he was walking. After a moment, he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto walked towards the edge of the place. He looked up as Acnologia finally came into view. The malevolent dragon brushed aside the clouds blocking his path. Naruto stared up at the dragon and then smiled before waving his right hand. Perhaps it had been out of habit, but at this moment, Acnologia didn't seem interested in greeting him. Why don't you come down here and have a coffee of warm dragon blood with me? Naruto called out to the dragon. He had no such, but it was just pointless talk. He was often doing that these days. The dragon's response came in the form of charging a powerful breath. Looking up at the danger, Naruto sighed. Acnologia's ferocious dragon's breath charged towards the temple with malevolence. Within seconds, it crashed into the temple, completely consuming the structure. A large column of debris picked up after the spell. When everything died down, there was no structure standing, just a flat concrete surface within the ground, marked with black symbols. I'd considered pretending to be dead for a moment, Naruto suddenly said, standing atop of Acnologia's head. The view is quite lovely from here. Acnologia had already sensed the blonde. He transformed into his human form and twisted in midair to face the blonde. He said nothing as he lunged forward, thrusting a right punch towards the blonde's chest. Naruto quickly folded both his hands across his chest to block the incoming attack. Acnologia's fist collided with his defense, creating a shockwave as Naruto held firm. But he was sent rocketing towards the ground in a flash. Shit, that hurt, Naruto cried as he tried to regain control over his body movements. He crashed to the ground on one knee, landing in a loud boom. He didn't mind anything as he shook both his throbbing hands. Acnologia was indeed the Dragon King. When was the last time someone hit him so hard? Naruto had never experienced it in this world. Then again, this was the big bad of the realm of magic. Shaking his head, Naruto tossed his glance forward as Acnologia crashed down. You took that well, Acnologia said with a grin. I was right, you are a worthy opponent. A weaker opponent would have died even after blocking it. Naruto didn't get up. This was going to get dangerous if he didn't do anything. He still had no intention of fully engaging the dragon. I'm hurt, he said. What's the big deal though? I thought you and I had established that we would not be fighting. I grew bored and your foul stench continues to grow foul to my nose with each year, Acnologia responded. Can't you think of anything other than trying to destroy me? I mean, if you want a good battle, I will give it to you, Naruto said. Acnologia stared at him for a moment. You refuse to show me, but you have just proved that you can entertain me before I rip you apart. Naruto shook silently. I'm scared, he said. He then blinked, as if he just realized something. You're talking to me today, he exclaimed. How long has he wished for the dragon to be interested in talking to him? But he knew, if Acnologia was showing interest on fighting him, it meant he had decided to acknowledge him or he has stumbled on something that would make him curious, and the only person who could make the dragon do that was Zareth. He frowned just thinking about it. I have decided to acknowledge you as an enemy that I must crush, Acnologia responded. It was amazing that even in his presence, the blonde displayed no sign of anxiety or fear. When he met dragon slayers, if they didn't arrogantly think they could beat him, they tried to flee in fear. It had been the same with dragons before he annihilated all of them. But Naruto did not display the fear nor the arrogance. I should be happy, but I have one question. Did Zareth tell you of my location? Naruto asked with his head tilted to the side, curious about something. I have no intention of continuing with this pointless chatter, Acnologia said before dashing toward the blonde. Naruto breathed in before breathing out the monstrous roar that should not come from the mouth of a human but that of a dragon. The roar was in blue flames, spreading out wide as it expanded. It forced Naruto to skid backwards behind its force. When Naruto stopped it, there was a large pathway created on the ground by the spell, but there was no sign of Acnologia. The Dragon King flashed behind Naruto, his right claw cleaving through the air in a downward slash. The stuff on Naruto's back suddenly pulled out, flashing just in front of him. There was a clang sound when his claw collided with the stuff. When it started to glow, Acnologia breathed in before releasing a powerful roar that engulfed the blonde from point-blank range. The roar blasted everything, digging deep into ground, before leaving a huge crater. Acnologia landed on the edge of the crater and looked down. There was no sign of Naruto, just a black sword floating in the air. The sword glowed blue before disappearing in a flash. Classic, Kurama said as Naruto swung his legs, sitting on a tree's branch, kilometers away from where his temple once laid. Naruto just shrugged. Acnologia is not our priority now. Besides, he serves as motivation for why we must restore you. I'm afraid if I don't think the power is necessary for something else, I won't put that much effort in trying to restore you, the blonde said in a quiet tone. You are openly admitting that to me? It isn't like you can do something about it, Naruto said as he held out his right hand. His sword flashed onto his palm and then morphed into the stuff. He put it away in the sheath on his back. Kurama frowned but chose not to indulge Naruto's taunts. When are you going to get serious about things? You are walking in the pace of a snail, and don't seem to realize that. How many years have you spent on your rest? You seem to forget that the rest is important for my body's function, Naruto reminded Kurama. What is more important is you regaining your strength, not my preference to sleep than wander around aimlessly. Can you still not absorb a lacrima filled with natural energy without your body threatening to burst like a balloon? The jibe aside, Kurama was not pleased with how things were proceeding. No, he said. Even if I do consume, it doesn't seem to change my physical presence but just adds more energy, which I am struggling to control. The temple is the only place that can sustain me without you around. Naruto corrected the Biju. We will have to master creation of all things if we are going to do this. Creating an Etherion body for you must now become our priority since the old approach is not working. Maybe we will give you a human body with your real body being what you are. Don't insult me, Kurama responded in a sharp tone. I would rather look like a demon than a pitiful human. Naruto just smiled, shaking his head. Even after all these years, Kurama still had his issues with humans. Then again, the others would certainly laugh at him if they saw him walking around like a human. That solves your part, but not my problem, he said in a slightly serious tone. That is just an idea, Kurama stressed, but it isn't the first time we thought about this. The reason we even met Zareth in the first place was because of his creations. You failed miserably to master creation of all things, and sought to understand the magic that Zareth used. However, we were forced to reconsider because of the dangers it posed. Magic was truly something else. With chakra, there was no such thing as curses. You could bring the dead to life. You could retrieve souls from the other world, but in this world, it seemed rather impossible. Zareth had failed to bring back Natsu to life. What existed now was not his brother, but a demon. I will put on my thinking hat and study more. We have the basics, Naruto said before smiling. In a couple of years, we could have a book, called the Book of Kurama. Kurama snorted at the thought. In a couple of years for you can be a decade. You could spend time in a library reading and then decide that you need to sleep to absorb all the information. There is nothing wrong with that. An idiot will always be an idiot, Kurama said. What do I expect? You could never grasp the complex things in your shinobi days. It is rather unfortunate that I get to be stuck with you in this situation. Now you are insulting my intelligence, Naruto exclaimed. Prove me wrong. Naruto thought about it before shrugging. You won't manipulate me that easily, Foxy-chan, Naruto said with a wide grin. But all my years of living should be put to the test through this. But if I fail, I have failed. I still won't ask Zeref, I'm sure he can do it. But telling him would be giving him secrets to my body. Ah, I'm talking like Madara now. Kurama snorted. As much as I hated the man, I'll admit, compared to him, you fail in comparison. Naruto was not bothered by that response. It is Madara who failed. I live, and continue to live. And even if this takes us decades, we will eventually do it, Naruto said. But we need better understand of time, for that reason, I need to speak to Demaria. And then Irene before we begin our search. Before that, will you be able to retrieve the magic you put inside that storage? Last time you failed to retrieve anything you had stored there because the space was limitless and you could not survive there because it does not support life. Do you think I would do something as stupid as that? How many years did it take for us to make those lacrima? You'd think I'd risk losing them? It would not be the first time you did. You have such low opinion of me, Naruto said quietly. In any case, we must now turn them into raw stones of energy that we can break apart as food. But this can be done smoothly. For now, we must deal with this little problem of our inability to master the art of time and make breakthrough in creating a body for you. Your inability, not our. Naruto was silent for a moment before shaking his head. Magic particles are rather dangerous. But because of you, and being a former shinobi who has his chakra points bloated by your chakra, my capacity to hold magic is amazingly high. Having too much magic power doesn't always translate to strength. Even when you had ridiculous amounts of chakra, you could not do much other than create those cage bunshin, Kurama reminded Naruto. You seem to forget that you also use a lot of magic compared to others. With high magic volume comes with high magic consumption, Naruto said with a sigh. In any case, we might need to even learn the one magic or the magic that Zeref use. But once more, we will have to consider the rules of such magic, because if we break them, we become cursed. I've already lived a cursed life by being a Jinchuriki, and now I am free. I would rather not suffer the same fate once more. And if there is no other way, we will cross that bridge when we have to. We should head to the Alvarez. I believe we have collected enough magic power to work around diluting things, Naruto said in thought. Absorbing pure magic particles could be lethally dangerous. Had it not been for his strong life force, he would have already accidentally killed himself. The thing he truly hated about magic was its set of rules that simply could not be broken without incurring the penalty for such an offense. At least this way took away some risks. You just want to see that woman, Kurama said. Will it be safe though? We are not openly going there, my friend. If possible, I'd like to disappear without anyone who I have not met knowing I was there, Naruto said. A couple of days later. Whether days or months passed, nothing seemed to change about the empire. There was one glaring fact that remained constant throughout these years it has been formed. It was filled up by mages who lacked a moral compass. Most of them were merciless brutes who got aroused by seeing others suffer and inflicting the damage themselves. A bunch of arrogant pricks. Defeat them from their high pedestal and they start crying like little children who've lost their candy. People who thought they were superior could not think of defeat. Once you kicks them from behind, it is only wailing pitifully, looking for mercy when they had refused to give any in their time as the stronger. It was perhaps laughable for Naruto to look down on these animals. He had lived amongst them. When Zeref was forming this empire, subduing guild after guild, he had wielded his axe, assisting the Black Wizard. Perhaps the indifference that now ruled his life made him ignore the hypocrisy. Well, not everyone was an agent of evil. There were good people. The civilians were an ignorant bunch, oblivious to many dangers that surrounded their emperor and his shields. For them, a demolition job by the shields was a victory against an enemy of their home. Who would not cheer victory against an enemy? Naruto glanced into the black sky, with an expressionless mask on his face. He'd left this place but here he was once again. He could not really abandon Irene. Not after what he has said to her. Not after what they have been through together. Irene's residence was quiet, though it could be a torture house when the woman felt like it. Her sadistic personality often left him with a bitter taste on his mouth. But he'd only commented on it being distasteful and worked to stop it without actually slapping some senses into the woman. He did not step inside but jumped over to the rooftop, and then laid still on his back. Their stars had abandoned the night, it was just purely dark. Chickens were already asleep now. Accidental people were lying in their rooms, afraid of the dark. Whether it was dark or day, Naruto did not care. There was no time that was not convenient for him, not unless he didn't want to do anything. It didn't take long for Irene to show up, and this time, there was no violence. She just stood by him, glaring into the dark night. Acnologia came to my place and attacked me, Naruto started in a measured tone. How is that unusual? He came to a place where no one should know. Naruto glanced at Irene. She was looking at him with the corner of her eyes. Zerf asked. He did, Irene said with indifference. What do you want? Such coldness. And to think that this was a woman he had shared some fond memories with. She was no doubt bitter about his decision to leave. He had left her, as he had often done. Perhaps it was why she could not depend on him on anything. She did what she wanted, because he was not constantly around. Sighing deeply, Naruto closed his eyes and responded, I've missed you. You and I are enemies. When you decided to leave the Empire, you severed your friendship. At this moment, I could alert the others who are in the capital and they would not waste time coming here. Was she cold enough to do that? Naruto knew the answer, but that would probably be because she had no appetite to fight him. August would have told her that if they ever stood on opposite sides, she was to do the dirty work. Such a cruel world, but this was living. He had seen too many suns and moons to be surprised. Generations may come and go, but fundamentally, humans hardly change. I need your help with something, Naruto said in a serious tone. Irene had no doubt it had something to do with his problems, or at least the desire to become human again. That appeared to be his greatest desire. In fact, everything he did seemed to move toward that goal. The other things were merely side projects. She amused herself thinking that Naruto probably didn't have restless nights thinking about Acnologia's immense power. He probably has not skipped even a meal while plotting for a way to tackle the Dragon King. He didn't even fear the dragon to begin with. What was he that feared? Not being human again, probably. Irene shook her head. For someone who complains that the Spriggan lack a moral compass, you surely have no regard to the state of the magic world or the fact that Acnologia can end this world, Irene said with a stare. It isn't that I do not care, I just don't try to prioritize it. I have lived my life trying to be the hero. But now I am not concerned about being a hero. I believe that after everything I have done and been through, I deserve to be selfish, Naruto explained with a slight shrug of shoulders. What have you done? Naruto just smiled. Some other day, he said. For someone who claims that the Emperor hides things, you surely hide a lot of things. I spoke to him some time ago and he asked me what I knew about you, Irene said, her eyes no longer at Naruto but the heavens. It is most likely that he was merely sowing the same seed you tried. You think I'm naive? You are not. I know you, but I cannot say the same about His Majesty. Irene shook her head. She really hoped that his naivety would not bring an end to things one day. Someone calling the Black Wizard naive. Naruto put on a surprised look on his face. This is new, but I would have preferred it if you didn't think I'm playing a game. I'm far too old to be playing that kind of a game. You are not a child, Irene. I think treating you as a naive child to be taken for manipulation would be disrespectful, he added in a firm tone. What do you want me to do? Teach me an enchantment, Naruto said. Say, you have two parts of you, would it be possible to enchant the other part in another body? Irene's head turned down to fully stare at the blonde. He was asking her something curious. It left her with a lot of questions of which he was probably not going to answer. The body is only a temple to the soul. You have one. Unless you are talking about that fox. That fox, Naruto realized something. Perhaps one of the reasons there was this gap between him and Irene was because he always kept things from her. How could she trust him? How could she be fully open with him when he couldn't do the same? Shaking his head, Naruto responded. His name is Kurama, Naruto said. He has been my partner since birth. I told you of the tragedy that was my birth. The fox became my partner that night and has been since. I give him a hard time, but he has saved my life countless of times. I am even alive because of him. Irene glanced to the side for a moment. She didn't consider sitting down. She didn't want to be comfortable. Partner, huh? What happened? We encountered a powerful foe. In order to save both of us, Kurama had to give himself away, but this resulted in unintended consequences. I lost most of my humanity. I've been trying to regain it, but it looks very slim. Either way, I want to restore my friend. This is my lifelong dream. I want him to be whole again and walk in majesty. You see, his true form. Yes, he is the same size as you in your dragon form. I was thinking of learning that body swapping enchantment to be able to get it done once I have a body, Naruto said. I can do it for you, Irene said. You've not the slightest of intentions of teaching it to me, do you? You are no longer part of the Empire. Naruto shook his head. Don't be like this. We were together before the Empire came around. We should not allow it to come in between. You'll let me know when you want it done, Irene said, ignoring what Naruto had just said. The blonde shook his head. Well, there was one clear path now, and it was to create an Etherion body for Kurama. But that was going to take him years and a lot of effort. But it could be done. He just has to be careful that he doesn't end up breaking the rules of magic and end up being cursed. He was tired of curses and carrying burdens. He needed a free life and would not do anything to jeopardize it, not unless there was no other way out of a tricky situation. How have you been, Irene? She glanced at him for a second before looking away. When she tried to leave, Naruto grabbed her left leg, stopping her on her tracks. He put on a small, honest smile. Please sit with me, even if you don't want to talk, I'll insist. You say please and insist? I just really want you to sit with me, Naruto said calmly. Irene thought about it for a minute before speaking. Follow me, she said. She was not going to sit on his terms. If he wanted to speak to her, he could speak to her somewhere she commanded and could relax without the need to watch over someone. Does it have to be on your terms? Naruto asked with a slight shake of his head. I'll follow you, but tell me what has been happening in this world. What have you been doing? Irene asked instead. Slumber. It is the perfect way to try to regulate the magic moving through my body in the pathways. Since I am not human, I can induce sleep for as long as I want, as long as I'm at a place where I can still absorb magic. Food did not sustain him, but magic did the trick. He was talking about pure magic particles, or as he would call it in his world, natural energy. Nothing much, but I hear Fury has been doing grand magic games above the place where they used to host the Dragon King festivals, Irene said in thought. How times have changed. Long ago, she'd been in harmony with dragons and now they were all dead, herself turning into one. I wish I could have gone, Naruto said. To the dragon festivals, of course. Human games can only be limited, he paused glancing at Irene. If you could change the past, what would you change? What is the point of the question? I cannot change the past, thinking about what may or what could is a pointless exercise, Irene said sharply. Maybe, but this world had a time travel gate. These people could into the past and the future. Space-time ninjutsu was a lot more different as it had only allowed one to create a pocket dimension of their own and move through distance in the blink of an eye. Naruto could not move in such a method, but he had managed to find a way to rip the fabric of space to create his own dimension. Then again, it was perhaps not his dimension, but he had simply managed to successfully create a door into the limitless space that could not sustain life form, for a human at least. But it describes what you aspire and regrets. I have no doubt you wish things could have gone different. If your husband had not done what he did, if you had not lost your humanity, things could have been different. My childhood dreams and desire were shaped by my pain. The pain of loneliness and suffering at the hands of people who considered you a demon. Perhaps it is because I have now become indifferent. I wonder why I still sucked up to them and loved them even when they would have driven me to insanity had I not been strong, Naruto said in a thoughtful tone, a sad smile on his lips. You were just naive, Irene said. From what he has said before, that was the only truth. True, Naruto said. Have you given up? I am a dragon despite my wealth of magic and knowledge. I have not been able to find a way to change things. I've just accepted that I am a dragon. What a sad, miserable woman. Even in that form, you still feel the sensations of a human's, sexual sensations I mean. The eggs inside of you are probably still that of a human, but you'd probably give birth to a deformed human, or a human, you never know, Naruto said with a smile on his face. But I do think it is impossible to return to your human form. But such a process would require magic that no one possesses. Is that why you have been gathering magic? Partly, Naruto said, then stood up and stepped in front of Irene. He placed both his hands on her shoulders and spoke in a firm tone. I just decided this now, making you human again will be my lifelong mission. You are not allowed to die before that happens. If I die, what I am saying is that if it means I must fight Acnologia, the Emperor, or even a death of God, I will do so. Irene snorted. If you really wanted that, you would not have left. Naruto pulled her closer. Irene did not react but just stared at him with cold eyes. Through the years, Naruto had only seen her eyes warm, in maybe 3 or 4 occasions. This cold look did not bother him, he still smiled. I'm sorry for that and for always leaving you alone. The following day, disguised in a henge, and magical power suppressed to the maximum, Naruto was walking through the streets of the capital of the Alvarez Empire with hands inside his pockets. The streets were lively as always. The people here lived in ignorance, but it was usually like this with civilians. It was always the warriors who knew the danger and the ungrateful normals could only walk around, passing judgment about things they could not even comprehend. Even so, Naruto was never loath to walk around the streets. He was always happy to busk in the warm reception he received from the citizens of this empire. You must very pleased with yourself, Kurama said to Naruto. Naruto did not immediately respond. He looked at a large building in front of him. His next target was surely here, getting drunk. That vulgar woman didn't have a problem with intoxicating her brain cells. But it was preferable compared to her bringing terror to those she viewed as enemies. Any reason I should not? Just be careful you don't get stabbed in the back because you have loved a woman. Your affections tend to make you uncontrollable and make you do stupid things, Kurama said with disgust over the thought of some of Naruto's actions in the past. You cannot fault the heart, Naruto defended himself. He then smiled. Well, I may have been a little overzealous in my love for both Sakura and Sasuke. A little? Kurama asked with disbelief. That Uchiha nearly killed you. Had it not been for me, you would have died miserably chasing after an arrogant bastard. Even after he nearly killed you, you still chased after him like a lovesick puppy. You even got begged the Raikage to forgive him for his actions. You should not have. You should have made him face the consequences of his actions. Death. It is what he deserved. You are just saying that cause of your contempt for all Sharingan wielders, Naruto said with a shrug. He walked into a bar. The men Demaria led when she had to battle always came here. This was their stomping ground. This was their faction's headquarters. Naruto had some moments here where he ended up trampling on some of them after some argument with the goddess of time. That had pissed her, but Naruto hadn't cared enough to nurse her wounded pride. The bar was crowded. There was noise, laughter, the smell of alcohol. Men hunters were eagling around the large hall, looking for a target. Naruto snaked around the many tables and went into a separate room. It was like an office. There was the smell of loneliness. Demaria was lying on a couch, alone. What a miserable woman. Perhaps it was because no one else in her tribe was around. He stopped at the entrance and folded his hands across his chest, looking at her. After a moment, his silent footsteps made way toward her. Being a former shinobi was truly useful in such moments. You were trained to kill in all different ways. Silent killing usually was for masked crusaders. Naruto had never been a fan of death, but life taught you that not all lives could be saved. Demaria's eyes snapped open when Naruto sat just below her waist, hands balanced on both sides of her head. He was staring at her. Very close. The hinge was already undone. She frowned seeing him here. But before she could say anything, the distance was closed. His lips were touching hers. She could feel his breath. The warm touch of his fingers which were now moving on her stomach. He pressed her, pushing her lips open. Demaria did not move. But it did not stop his smooth, skilled lips from soothing hers. She kissed back. After a couple of seconds, his tongue slipped inside her mouth. She refused to dance with it and considered biting it. But she just twisted her face to the side to stop the kiss. What the fuck are you doing here, you traitor? She demanded. Naruto just smiled and gently fell on her. His hands snaked around her and held her right. She felt warm and nice. Regardless of how cold she was still a beautiful woman. There was a part of him that was willing to ignore all her flaws as a person to enjoy the blood flow she aroused within him. The physical sensations were always different. He felt a little aroused just thinking about it. Demaria tried to push him away, but he was not saying anything, nor was he budging. He'd always been ridiculously strong. There probably was no one with pure physical strength to match his. Why had she even bothered trying to struggle? She tried to activate her magic, but instead of her teeth clicking, she ended up biting Naruto's fingers after they'd forced themselves inside of her. Don't be like this, dear. I missed you. Get off me. What will happen if someone sees us? I sealed the door and I was disguised when I came here. Nobody knows I am here. Our secret is a little safe, Naruto said in a smooth tone. Demaria stopped struggling after appearing to think for a couple of seconds. She closed her eyes. She must be crazy. The bastard had abandoned the empire and now he was here. He'd always done as he pleased. Even in battle, he'd even gone as far as to stop in their way to avoid what he termed as pointless bloodshed and death. August had condoned it, but he'd occasionally fought with Ajil because of it. Well, to suggest they fought was glossing over it. Naruto had smacked Ajil with his stuff. She stayed silent, feeling his warmth. Invil was going to glare at her. He'd already said this was the enemy, but the Emperor had said there should be no fighting with Naruto, unless he said it was okay to do so. And by then, it would be war. For now, he'd said, they could all be civil. He'd said that looking at Irene. Not that she even reacted to it. Of course, Invil had opposed, but the Emperor stood firm. Will you get off me? I'm struggling to breathe, and I was certain I told you not to touch me again without my permission. She was struggling again. Did she just enjoy struggling? No, she did not like being dominated. She wanted to dominate. He would never give that to her. The only person who was going to dominate him was Irene, at least on his terms. Naruto flipped them both, putting her atop. His hands were behind her, holding her firmly. His right moved to her butt and slapped her. "You're a woman now. Randy must have also grown. Last time I saw you, you were still a girl. But these couple of years have been good to you." He was reminding her that they've not seen each other in years. It had truly been some time since they last spoke or even touched. Yet, she could still remember his touch as if he had been touching her earlier this morning. The only thing there was longing. But of course, she was not going to admit that. "Are you going to bring her up?" "But yes, she has grown." Naruto smiled. "Sorry, it is just you. But there is no need to be jealous of her. I hold no such feelings." Demaria snorted. "Yeah right," she said with sarcasm. "You have not aged, not even a little." "I've stopped aging," Naruto said. His hand slipped from behind her front. When he tried to slip it inside her pants, she quickly stopped him and got up. Naruto just smiled without getting up. "I can smell the excitement." "What do you want? You have been gone all these years, why have you come back?" "I came to see you." Demaria glared at him. "I can walk out of this room, right now." "You and threats," Naruto said with a shake of his head. "I did come to see you, but there is also something I want. It is very fundamental for my goal. But for now, we can try to please each other. Don't you think? Have you found anyone who's performed better than me?" "Who said someone touched me?" Naruto stared before laughing. "Ah, of course, they are all too unworthy and weak to touch you." He rose and tried to pull her closer once more, but Demaria went away. He blinked as he saw her standing by the entrance, with bottles of beer. Time magic, he realized. "If I indulge you, you might decide to just disappear. And I'll just hate you further. And will feel used. I'll indulge you, but for my own pleasure. But talk to me first," Demaria said in a stern tone before sitting on the couch once more. Naruto sat up and settled calmly. "You know drinking with me is not fair." Demaria blinked. "I forgot about that," she said before shrugging with indifference. "Where have you been?" "My home. I'd slumbered there while resting, but I was cut short when Acnologia suddenly showed up and destroyed it. I had to dance a bit before fleeing," Naruto explained before gulping down the beer. It felt bitter. But at times, this feeling just made him miss being completely human. "Flee like a coward," Demaria shook her head. "But you are not a coward, are you? Since when don't you believe that? You've always been the one to call me a coward." "I have the right to call you that," Demaria said, staring at him. "So, time just moved while you slept." "Your indifference sometimes astounds me," she said in a measured tone. "Especially given the gospel you like preaching." "My thoughts are unfair, just as life is," Naruto said with indifference. "You still hating on me?" "Without question. The moment I see you on the opposite side of the battlefield, I'm attacking you," Demaria said firmly. "If you were not such a nasty person, we would truly get along. And yet you are here, waiting to see me naked." Naruto laughed. "Fair point," he said. "How long?" "I have all day, and it isn't like Irene is waiting for you. When you leave here, the next time we meet, we might be enemies." "We've always been enemies. In front of people, but yes, I still hold some contempt," Demaria said with a nod of her head. "You came here because of my magic, isn't it?" "Yes," Naruto said. He then turned to Demaria and pulled her toward him. Without warning, her grabbed her bust, and then licked her on the right side of her face. "I'm getting impatient," he whispered in a husky tone. Demaria did not react. She did not show excitement. Her face was masked by an expressionless look. She put away the bottle she held and then spoke. "I thought of stabbing you for a moment," she whispered into his left ear in a dangerous tone. She then started to plant a kiss on the side of his neck. "It would have just made me bleed, not kill me. You'd still have felt pain." "You truly are a sadistic woman," Naruto said with nonchalance. Contempt. Naruto could never understand just how this woman felt about him. What had he done that she liked and hated him at the same time? She never expressed any likeness in her face. It was always contempt and then insults from her mouth. "Will you stop looking at me as if I have killed someone dear to you? How do you even have the guts to look at me like that after everything?" Naruto asked, staring at Demaria with a raised eyebrow. "I hate myself for indulging you," Demaria said in a whisper. "What do you really seek to achieve with the knowledge about time? Ever since we have known each other, it seems to be the only thing that you care about." Naruto smiled, a sly smile. "That is not completely true, and you know it. There is no other truth, and if things were different, you would not have treated me like a cheap prostitute even after stealing my innocence." "I apologized," Naruto said with a stare. "In any case, a god of time resides inside of you. A god of time should be able to manipulate time any way they liked because they rule over it. The fact that you get to be called a god over something, it means that you either have absolute control over it or some degree of control. From what I have seen from you, you cannot manipulate time to do anything. Which is a disappointment, really. Then again, gods of this world have limits. At times, I think they are nothing more than what I call a god in my world, he said with a slight shake of his head. I will try to ignore the insult you just tossed to my side, Demaria said in hardened tone. Naruto ignored this and just continued speaking. I want to know as to the limits one would have to manipulate time. I have questions. Is it possible to reverse time? To fast forward it? No, reversing it is possible. But just a second of reversing the time of the whole world can cost you your entire lifespan. It is really not something a mere human can play with. But a god does not have limited lifespan as humans. What would you do if you found a way to do it? I'm not saying I can't or can. Even if I could, I would never do it for you. Naruto smiled. A truly bitter smile. I do not have any noble intentions. I'm actually a very selfish person. My study for magic is for entirely personal reasons, nothing grand. And I know you should not mess around with time. The price of messing around with it are heavy. But of course, not for a god. He then stood up. He bent over to Demaria and kissed her on her forehead. I will see you soon, Demaria. I will be gone for a little while. But I will be very conscious. I head to Fury. I hear there is something interesting happening there. Kurama opened his eyes, trying to figure out just what Naruto was thinking about his recent plans with both Irene and Demaria. He didn't think it was merely emotional attachments. There were even times he wondered if Naruto even cared for another human. He was no longer that child. He was no longer naive. The number of years he has lived have certainly done their damage. But Kurama was not complaining. He just didn't like it when Naruto kept his thoughts hidden, even from him. Do you really hope to rewind time? It is a thought, Naruto answered. He was walking along the streets once more, heading over to Irene to say his goodbyes to her. But I don't intend to rewind the time of the whole world. While my life force means I can work with magic that drains the life of a person, I want to avoid getting old because of such recklessness. But this has nothing to do with us. They already had a plan. It was something they'd considered long before. Zeref had come to the picture because of this plan. Indeed, Naruto said, that is why I won't bore you with the details. I will surprise you. I'm not sure I'm going to like the surprise, Kurama said. But that aside, are we really going to Fury? Yes, Naruto said with a small nod. A little disappointed with what we learned from Demaria though. Her magic only allows her to stop the flow of time in a world that she creates. It is merely a fraction of time magic. Thus, you cannot say she controls time, but a mere fraction of it. We must look for more properties of time to control before we can even begin to think of reversing time. Another long process. Indeed, Naruto said. For that reason, we can now no longer afford to slumber. Another reason for going to Fury is that there is another woman who can control certain properties of time. Who? That woman we spoke with at the boat last time we were at Fury. I believe her name is Ultir. She is a member of the Magic Council. We must find her, speak to her and try to learn more about how she manipulates things. You think she is just going to tell you the secrets of her magic? Naruto smiled. Of course not. We will force her if he must. I don't care if she is part of the Magic Council. Those arrogant pricks are hardly relevant to anything. He said before pausing for a second. But first we must first explain to Irene where I have been. He also wanted to see the magical games in the country. He had to see what kind of games they were hosting and how things were in Magnolia. He might even come across Zeref. The one thing he hoped to avoid coming across was Acnologia. The dragon was likely to chase after him until they battle it out this time around. Naruto had no desire to fight a battle that could threaten his very existence. At least not now. There was no pressing reason to do so. It was not like Acnologia was going around attacking humans for the pure reason of destruction. You must explain. I thought we were partners. When it comes to your fun, we are not partners. I'm not the one who enjoys fooling around with women. If you want to do it, I can let you temporarily take control of my body. Kurama snorted. Have you started smoking? Naruto looked over the town of Magnolia with an expressionless mask on his face. When last had he even touched on this town? He could not remember. But it was surely lively. Then again, with a guild as famous as Fairy Tail stationed within the town, it was bound to be a lively place. The mages of Fairy Tail were infamous, but most especially, the Salamander, for their powers of destruction. There was never a clean assignment and the Magic Council has always had thoughts about destroying the guild or just outlawing. Of course, such an idea was nonsensical, but the council was not known for making fair and just decisions. Had he been that child of a shinobi, he would have been fighting to wrongs the council has done, but he now really didn't care. As long as they didn't get in his way, he would not care about what the council was up to. Still, things could go either way with him now playing in this stage. He really didn't want to have to battle the council, because only one would remain standing. As ineffective and insufficient as it was, it still managed to hold back on some lurking darkness from crawling into the shadows. Do you think we will have a problem with the council now that we are on that stage? This is Ishgar. Those unjust wizards look at things with the eyes of a judgmental god. Kurama didn't offer an immediate response. Things could either way. But within the Alvarez, Naruto had not stood out that often. Whenever he was within this continent, he had always kept to himself. But things would be different now, wouldn't they? He was going to be loud, draw attention. With his magic power, there was just no way the council was going to let him be. Not to mention he was with the Alvarez Empire. The worst thing that could happen is them asking you to join the Wizard Saints. Kurama said with distaste over the thought of Naruto being a wizard saint. Naruto laughed. Yes, that would be worst, he said with a wide grin. The strongest are so-called gods of Ishgar, but compared to the Spriggan, they are truly just children. Levels of power cannot truly be compared, the blonde said with a shake of his head. It was a little sad, but then again, it was not unusual. Within the shinobi world, Konoha had always stood out, producing finer shinobi than the rest. One village had just one outstanding shinobi, but Konoha would have a handful. The generation in which he was born could not even be compared to the generation of the Sandaime Hokage in terms of power. Well, he didn't have to worry about the gap, he was not that lacking. And yet you chose to come here. It's for my moral conscience. A moral compass that you follow when it's convenient. You got a problem with that? I'm only looking out for survival, Kurama said with shrug. Let's just get on with the business and get out of here. This innocent and happy mood is making me uncomfortable. Naruto laughed. They did not usually parade around such places. In fact, he spent more time away from humans. If he was with humans, it was not the kind of happy people. It was miserable people with loose screws up in their heads. Irene was certainly a prime example of this. Where was he even leaving Demaria? At least Brandish was a good girl. Ah, yes, a very good girl, but she had her own problems and she loved her empire a little too much for his liking. She'd probably never betray it regardless of what happens. I'm sure many people would be disappointed in me, Naruto said with a look on his face. Strangely enough, there was little concern over that. Perhaps it was the number of years he has lived. You live long enough, certain things you stop caring about. Your heart never truly remained the same. Naruto hoped that he would not lose it all. He was not a bad person, just a bit questionable at times. His current life was a far cry from the never giving up life, hunting for peace kind of life and doing good with all the goodness of his heart. Those had truly been good days. Stupid, yes, but good days. He had experienced love, friendship, pain, loneliness, betrayal, the sense of success and achievement when the village had welcomed him with open hands and hoisted him into the air, chanting his name after his heroics with Nagato. A lot of luck there, but he had done it. It's not like the current you cares about that, Kurama said. Let us just get this over with and then get out of here. Why the hurry? I don't trust you won't end up doing something bad to amuse yourself, Kurama said in a stern tone. You wouldn't even think twice before starting a war with Fairy Tail if it meant you could test how they would fare against the assault of the Alvarez Empire. Naruto was expressionless for a second, thinking deep about what Kurama had just said. That is an idea, but I wouldn't go that far, the blonde said, while grinning. You know, I would have the damn council on my back. It's best to do things differently. But before my urges get the best of me, let us do as you request, partner. Lucy couldn't stop the imaginary tears from streaming down her cheeks as she glanced at her wallet. There wasn't much. In fact, she was now poor. There was no money for rent. She was going to get kicked out of her apartment if she doesn't get a job, a high-paying job. She glanced at Natsu as they walked through the streets of Magnolia and then frowned. It was his fault she was broke and glaring at the fate of homelessness. Had it not been for him, she would not be on this situation. They got high-paying jobs but end up forfeiting the pay because of his destructive tendencies. When he was not destroying properties, he was gleefully foregoing pay. She didn't mind charity there and there, but it didn't help if they end up doing all their jobs for free. Talking to him would be a waste of time. Natsu was not going to listen. He was more interested in beating up bad people and causing havoc wherever he went than money. He lived under a tree. He didn't have to worry about rent. When his stomach growled madly, she glared at Natsu. Never was he going to buy her food. She was the adult here. But she didn't hate it, did she? There was the occasional trouble and her worries, but she had fun with him. She enjoyed it here, being his partner. Natsu, did you hear that? Happy suddenly asked, happily floating above the two. Natsu faced Lucy, eyeing her curiously. Her face reddened slightly with embarrassment, but whether he registered it or not was another matter altogether. You okay, Lucy? He asked with concern. Before Lucy could respond, Happy spoke. I thought it was Dragon growling. Are you sure it was her? The cat asked with blank look on its face. Of course it was me. Lucy shouted with glare leveled toward the cat. Happy was making fun of her, again. Her embarrassment evaporated quickly as she thought swatting it from the air. But when her stomach growled again, she stopped. Ah, that was you, Happy exclaimed. I'm hungry. If we don't eat something soon, I'm going to faint, the blonde cried. I'm not going to carry you if you faint, you are way too heavy. Lucy swung a fist toward Happy, who happily floated away to avoid getting hit. I don't ever hear you complaining when you carry Natsu. He isn't heavy as much as you. Lucy tried to take another swing at the cat. I'm going to kill you, stupid cat. Happy looked at her stupidly curious. Are you sure you should be wasting your energy shouting at me? You did say you were going to faint. I wouldn't be hungry if we actually got paid doing our job. I even had to spend what I had to fee. Lucy froze as he was bit by an intense wave of magic power she had never quite experienced in her life. Her heart pummeled against her rib cage as his knees sucked away all her energy, growing weak. Last time she experienced such power was when Acnologia appeared in Tenro Island, and that had turned up badly for them. She glanced up. Even Happy seemed to have frozen in midair. It was impossible, but she was seeing it. The flying cat was trembling, with its wings tucked in behind like a tail. The tension in the air was pulsating. Even the normally dense Natsu seemed to be aware of the danger before them. Lucy hoped it was not an attack. But she knew, there was no one in Fairy Tail with that much magic, not even Gildarts or the Master. Seconds became a flash. Time seemed to tick along with her heart in the seconds she had until she met her end. If this was an enemy, there was just no way they could win. It took a couple of seconds, but the man emitting such a malevolent pressure finally came into view. He looked normal. The stuff he held did no change and he had a smile on her lips. The crystal blue eyes seemed clear, yet she could not fathom what was within. Lucy blinked as she realized, he was staring directly at her. Did he know her? She didn't know him. Hey, watch where you going. He'd bumped into Natsu, causing the Dragon Slayer to fall flat on his butt. It was something remarkable, especially since he hadn't even budged or even seemed to blink to show he hit something. Lucy couldn't say he hadn't bumped into Natsu intentionally. He was looking at them when he did so. His eyes may be on her, but there was no way he could not have seen the salamander. Sorry, Naruto's eyes fell away from Lucy and turned to Natsu. He was smiling, a bit of a grin. I got distracted by your girlfriend, he said, holding out his right hand. Girlfriend? Natsu looked confused as he took Naruto's hand. The blonde smelled a little like him and other dragon slayers. He was surely a dragon slayer even if there was another foul stench mixed up in there. Lucy nearly face-palmed at Natsu's expression. Ignorance, not being dense, was not doing her friend any favors. How was he like this? But then again, his father was a dragon, his best friend was a cat. Still, credit to Happy, the cat seemed to know more about love than Natsu. It was occasionally chasing after another cat after all. The pressure seemed to be fair now. That immeasurable amount of magic that had her trembling in fear seemed to have simply disappeared. But there was no doubt, its shadow loomed large over the man before him. She was even afraid to look past him. I think he meant Lucy, Happy commented, staring at Lucy's bust. What the hell are you staring at, your perverted cat? Lucy put her arms across her bust to try to hide from the eyes staring at her. Well, those are the only things that could have distracted him, Happy said as a matter of fact. Naruto laughed, seeing the exchange between Cat and Lucy. It was like cat and mouse, no? He then smiled a bit slyly. The cat is not completely wrong. It was nevertheless wrong for me to stare while you were with your boyfriend. By that logic, it would not have been wrong if he did it when she was alone. Was he a shameless pervert? He is not my boyfriend. Oh. Naruto's smile widened as he took a little step closer to Lucy. Naruto, he said holding out his right hand. Lucy, yes. How do you know that? The cat mentioned it, Naruto responded causally. So, Lucy, would you like to have lunch with me? It can be a date, if you want. Huh? Naruto laughed. Her baffled expression was amusing. He had seen such looks many times before and it never got old. Of course, lewd comments usually received a slap or an attempt to kick in the nuts. I'm just messing with you, he said with a nonchalant wave of his right hand. He then turned to Natsu. Again, sorry about that, he said before walking past the three. Lucy stared. What was that? She was sure he was not even a bit sorry. He had hit Natsu intentionally after all. But where had she heard the name of Naruto before? It was not a familiar name, but she was sure she had heard it before. If you want to follow, you can. He did even offer to buy you food, Happy commented, seeing Lucy staring at the back of the stranger. Shove it, It was fair to say of all guilds within Fury, Fairy Tail was perhaps the most infamous of them all. There were legal guilds which did illegal things and were quite honestly detestable, and that was always due to the master. Each guild took the image of its master. Fairy was reckless. If intel was correct, the guild was most famous for its destruction tendencies, and the Magic Council has contemplated disbanding it. Such a notion was of course ridiculous, but the council could do anything it pleases and anyone who opposed would be deemed a threat. Such a corrupt world they were living within. But still, Naruto really didn't care about the actions of the council. As long as it had nothing to do with him. He was not going to go out of his way to avoid it. Where would be the freedom and fun in all that? After a moment of watching the guild building, Naruto let loose of a long breath before walking towards the entrance. There was only one person he wanted to see, and that was the person with the same scarlet hair as the delightful Irene. If not for Urza, he would not have bothered. He had to see her. To talk to her. To understand and befriend her. For her sake. And for her mother's sake. That ignorant woman would probably never admit her love for her daughter anytime soon, but Naruto would ensure that when she finally does, her daughter would be alive and perhaps mentally ready to get to know her mother. The moment he stepped into the guild hall, Naruto was assaulted by a criminally loud noise. But he only took a single step before glass shattered and everyone froze. Was presence that frightening? His was a little controlled, so much that even the likes of Invil disrespected him. Admittedly, a part of him did enjoy seeing people tremble at his magnificence. It reminded him of the day Tenro Island disappeared. The Ultier and her child so violently shook that they were stuck between two options: jump ship and drown to death, or resign to whatever fate he had prepared for them. Thankfully, he'd only been curious about the whereabouts of Zareth. And so, they lived to tell the story of a powerful mage they met. Naruto placed his hands inside his pockets and smiled as he looked around. His eyes trailed off at the bar, seeing Makarov sitting there with a jar of beer. The old man was glaring, but his entire body stiff. He was not bad news, was he? This was a little unpleasant now, but then again, he didn't want around humans with his main body that often to avoid chaos. Clones had usually done this kind of things while his real body remained hidden in the shadows. Letting loose of a long sigh, he started walking towards the old man. No one said a thing. They just watched him. Only their bodies moving. Once he was a little closer to Makarov, he suppressed his magic power to extreme lengths. There was an audible sigh of relief from the entire hall the moment he relieved them from the pressure of his magic. Makarov said nothing as Naruto jumped onto the bar counter, sat beside him with the stuff placed in between them. What did this person want from them? He was unnerved, disturbingly bothered by this appearance. If war was going to break out now, this building was not going to survive. But he didn't think Naruto had come here for that. Not when he had just walked in with his head held high. He looked at Laxus, seemed ready to pounce. At least Urza was not here. But she would soon be here. Makarov felt his intestines cringe, seeing the blonde watch his children with interest in them, watching him cautiously. At least no one had been stupid enough to attack the man. Natsu would have done it. But he had yet to return from his job. "Alright, you brats," Makarov suddenly exclaimed. "There is nothing to worry. Just prepare yourself, because we leave tomorrow for Fury to claim out spot as the strongest guild in this country." There was a rally of a cry that agreed with the master, and just like that, the atmosphere became lively once more. Makarov settled down and glanced at the blonde once more. "Let's go to my office," he said in a demanding tone. Naruto was silent for a couple of moments before shaking his head slightly. "No," he answered. "This is just fine. I'm quite enjoying the view." Makarov intensified his glare. He really couldn't read the mood or what the blonde was thinking. There was no sense of hostility, but his magic power wasn't exactly friendly. Seeing that Naruto was not going to budge, he groaned loudly and then faced his children. "Relax, old man," Naruto said in a light tone. "I'm not here for trouble." "That remains to be seen, but your presence here doesn't exactly spell good news for us with the Magic Council. If they knew you were here, I will probably have Rune Knights knocking at the door, asking questions," Makarov said in a flat tone. Naruto shrugged. It was hardly any relevant to him, and it was not like Makarov has won any awards for following the instructions of the council. But no doubt, given the dictatorship at the council, anything goes. "I don't remember being made an enemy of the council," Naruto said indifferently. "But nothing should really come out of this, unless the council is truly beyond hope." Makarov shook his head. "The new council is even more dangerous than the last," he said with displeasure. "They've been questioned already about a couple of things. Fairy Tail has been threatened with disbandment. It was a ridiculous farce. An abuse of power, but what could he do about it?" "Same old shit," Naruto said. He was surprised that he said words like that. He glanced behind when he felt a presence. It was the smiling face of Mirajane Strauss. He smiled, although he could see a hidden stare within her. Fairy Tail truly had some women, but still nothing he was accustomed to seeing in the Alvarez Empire. "What would you like for a drink?" Mira asked a bit too nicely. "With that sweet tone, I'd think you'd slip in something poisonous," Naruto said quietly and in jest. "But I'll still have water." Mira's smile didn't slip. She wanted to ask why he'd drink if he had such thoughts, but since he was just joking, she shrugged it off. He was dangerous, no doubt. But it did seem that the guild master knew him. Yet, what was obvious was that he was not happy to see the blonde. No, he was not even expecting to see him. She hardly saw the master this serious. Shaking her head, Mira prepared a glass of water before handing it over to Naruto. "So, how do you know master?" she asked. "My name is Mira, by the way," she added, realizing she hadn't introduced herself. Naruto just nodded. "We met a couple of years ago," he said. Makarov cleared his throat, stopping Naruto from saying anything further. He could have allowed the blonde to continue chatting with Mira, to give himself some time to get over his thoughts, but he didn't want this person to become familiar with his children. Naruto was a dangerous person, indifferent to many things. His association with Zarif and the Alvarez Empire made things even more complicated, but what bothered him most was his hidden intentions. He may have helped stop the war years ago, but it had been clear that he had absolutely no care over what happened to Fury or the lives that would have been lost. Admittedly, compared to those Spriggan, he had a moral compass and did not like doing needless things or to put people to suffer just for the sake of it. "Mira, let me talk to Naruto alone," Makarov said in a serious tone before turning his side glance at Naruto. "What do you want?" Naruto raised a curious eyebrow. "Is this how you greet me now? The Alvarez wanted to kill you back then when you came for audience with the Emperor, and I stepped in. I helped you." "Do you want payment?" Makarov asked. "And you were not helping me. You did what you wanted to do without consideration of anyone." Naruto shrugged. "Perhaps," he said in a thoughtful tone. "I understand your concerns, but as I said, I'm not here for trouble. I was just wandering about and decided to make a stop here before moving." The children were preparing for the Grand Magic Games at the capital. He was going to see them there. There was just no way was he going to miss crashing the games for his amusement and just to see just how powerful the mages in this kingdom were. He didn't have that much of high standards if God Serena was the best this continent had produced. Either way, it would be good for this people to know just how weak they're just before the Empire strikes. It would probably create a fuss with the council, but who cared? "And," Naruto waved his right hand dismissively, "you should know that I departed the Empire some time ago. It has been a number of years." Though, considering that he had gone against the others previously, it really should not be surprising. After a moment, Makarov took Naruto's words. No longer getting along. But they certainly wouldn't just allow someone like him to just leave. He probably knew a lot and his power would only cause a problem for them in the future. "No," Naruto shook his head. "I was never truly part of it. That is why I had refused to be called a Spriggan. It was always going to happen, the question was simply when and under what circumstances." But with his relationship with Zarif, there was no blood shed. "And they let you leave?" Naruto snorted. "Like hell. Those cold-hearted bastards would have rather incinerated me than let me leave freely. Even after those years together, they didn't think to say I had to be killed," he exclaimed, maybe a little more dramatically than intended. "Why didn't they?" "I'm not stupid," Naruto simply said. "Well, since I am not welcomed here, I better depart." Makarov frowned. He had questions. A lot of serious questions to ask of the blonde. "Wait." Naruto jumped to the floor shaking his head. "No can do, perhaps some other day," he said as he picked up his stuff. "I must depart." He had come here for Urza, but she was not in the guild building. Well, he could always catch her at the Grand Games. He was going to be there after all. But it was truly disappointing that he was not able to get what he wanted. Shaking his head, Naruto departed without saying another word. Makarov couldn't watch the blonde disappear as Laxus was right in front of him. Mira behind, her curious glance at the back of his head. They were waiting for answers. And he wasn't really going to give them. Did Naruto know? He had not made any indication that he did know. But perhaps he knew. There was just no way he didn't know, and he could have been here just to confirm. But it did seem like he was searching for someone or maybe something. "Is he the Naruto?" Mira asked. She has heard the name before, but there wasn't a lot known about the person or his appearance. Makarov nodded. "Yes," he said. "Whatever you do, don't get into a fight with him, especially you Laxus." "Is he that dangerous?" "Dangerous, yes. Powerful?" "Yes." Makarov didn't know much about the blonde's power, but just how powerful did you have to be to stand in the way of the Spriggan and tell them they would not pass while flexing your muscles? One of them had tried to attack, but he had been soundlessly beat before Naruto departed. The council was warned, but it was not the reason the Empire stopped in its path. Yes, Makarov said. You'll find out eventually. We are likely going to run into him once more, no doubt. If he was no longer part of the Empire, he was probably going to be moving freely. But then again, didn't he say he has been away from the Empire for a number of years and he was only learning about it now? For a moment, I thought you were going to say you'd come to join Fairy Tail, Kurama said with relief. Don't be ridiculous, Naruto was quick to say. Why would he do that when he had no relations with the guild? He didn't care to protect it. Their battles were their battles. He was merely interested in a couple of things. He shook his head, smiling. He had truly changed. The old him would have never had such thoughts. You were ridiculous sometimes, Kurama retorted. But I am glad. I would have taken my chances away from than being stuck with a guild. Ah, come on, it's not that bad, Naruto said. But I would still not allow myself to be tied to a guild, unless I was the master. Perhaps in the future, I can form my own guild. We just need to find competent mages to recruit. It would not be a bad thing. Unless things worked out in a different way with Irene. But maybe in the near future, after Zerf, they could all live somewhere, do anything they wanted. Of course, that would all still depend on whether he has achieved his mission. Without its success, he could never truly rest freely. He could never become wholly human again. He was just hanging by a thread, trying to be human at this stage, and if he did not solve it, he would lose the humanity he has. The only mages you'd find to be competent enough would be those you used to work with. Naruto shrugged. You never know about what kind of mages are hiding in the shadows, Kurama. The idea would not be so bad, but I don't think that woman would join you in anything, Kurama said dismissively. But then again, humans can surprise you, he added, though without much conviction than his first statement. It doesn't matter, Naruto said with a shrug. We just have to find what works for us. We cannot continue to live in the shadows. Especially once we have found a way to correct things that are wrong. It is understandable now since we have to do a couple of things that may get us in trouble with the Magic Council. I thought you didn't care about the Council. Just because I don't care nor fear them doesn't mean that I want to get cross its paths just like that. I don't like dealing with people who have blurred lines on what is wrong or right. Kurama snorted. You say it like you know what is right or wrong. I'm clear what is right and wrong. I just usually don't care, Naruto defended himself. In any case, with Urza not around, he could just leave this place and go somewhere or the capital. The magic games were about to begin and he could go there to make a nuisance of himself. Ezra would be there, so he would see her there. He was not worried about missing her now. Of course, he could still just wait on her or just hunt her down. She had to be somewhere around the town. He shook his head. He had gotten enough. There was no need to hurry about anything. Time was of no consequence to him after all. I truly fail to believe that the Natsu were saw as the same END who is supposed to be powerful enough to be able to beat Zeref, Naruto said with deep disappointment. It wouldn't take me being serious at all to reduce him to ashes in his current state, the blonde added, as he continued to drift further away from the town. Natsu was supposed to be powerful. He was supposed to be strong enough to perhaps even be a match of Acnologia, but he was not. His dragon-slaying magic was not that. But the mage had come across was normal. He was probably not even aware of his origins, not even aware he was the creation of Zeref, an Etherion, and that he is from years ago. It was a little sad. But the reawaken was probably within him. From what Zeref has said, END has lived before. There was something that forced his slumber. If Naruto was good with mind tricks, he'd try to find the solutions. He doesn't even seem to be the brightest, Naruto said to himself with a slight shake of his head. Kurama snorted. Knowing what Naruto was on about. It's not like you were any different, he seems to have just been like you. Naruto quickly shook his head. I was dense, but not that dense, and I knew to love when I was still just a brat. He cannot even comprehend any other form of relations, the blonde added in a firm tone. Well, that happens. We will see what tomorrow holds. Naruto came to an abrupt halt when he sensed a presence behind him with the town of Magnolia also behind him. When he turned his eyes, he could not see anything. He smiled. It was truly fascinating. The sensation he felt at least. A ghost? He shook his head. There was no such thing. Who is it? How is it that you can feel my presence, but you cannot see, can you? Mavis asked with surprise. She'd gotten over her fear of him long time ago. Naruto turned around, eyes closed. He didn't open them even as he responded. It was not difficult for him to feel the eyes that were on him. But a little bothersome that there was nothing he could do to see the person talking to him. It was perhaps his advanced magic and being that even made it possible to even hear her voice. Are you not going to answer my question? Mavis blinked. He'd completely ignored her question because she'd done the same. She smiled, despite her feelings. Mavis. Ah, Mavis, I assume you know me, which is why you are here. He tilted his head to the side. I'm a little uncomfortable with talking to someone who I cannot see. Your voice is a little innocent, but that can be deceiving. So, Mavis, what do you want? What is your intention with Fairy Tail and your connection with Zareth? Naruto smiled. Ah, someone with connections to the guild. I assume you also watched me when I was with Makarov, he said. Who knows? My intentions are as hidden to you as your figure is hidden to me, he said, turning around to depart from Mavis. Alvarez, despite her magic power and confidence, Demaria knew that Irene was not the kind of person you wanted to fool around with. She was after all the most powerful female of the Spriggan. Perhaps she has always been a little envious of her relationship with Naruto. But that was still something they never spoke about, not that she has ever bothered trying to hold a dialogue with the cold woman. For Irene, it was usually dishing out orders and inquiring about certain things. The woman was coming straight to her. Demaria was proud. She did not try to hide behind Brandish, who she was walking with within the passages of the palace of the Emperor. When the woman stopped in front of her, Demaria greeted, Lady Irene. What did Naruto even see in these children? The green-haired one was cared for deeply. Perhaps it was her innocence and naivety that had made him become drawn to her. But Demaria was another picture. No doubt, her magic had something to do with it. She wanted to ask about what the blonde had wanted with her, but she decided against it. Naruto came to see you while he was here, Irene stated, in a stern tone. Demaria could only nod. I see, Irene said before walking past the two. There was no doubt that he was serious about his promises. Naruto truly wanted to become normal again, and even after all these years, he has yet to give up. She had already done so, thinking the situation is irreversible. It was hopeless, but he was a stubborn person. And maybe he had a plan. Maybe it would work or maybe it would not. Anything could happen. But what was certain was that even if it failed, Naruto was not going to give up. Did she dare to hope again? Brandish watched Irene depart before facing Demaria with a stare. Wasn't the one who was always telling her to stay away from Naruto. She had once suspected there was something between the two, but had not made anything out of her thought. Still, Naruto had betrayed them and he had come here. This could not have been long ago. And Demaria hadn't said anything. What bothered her was that he hadn't come to greet her. Naruto was here, when? A week or two ago, Demaria responded with a shrug of indifference. Didn't stay around. She added. Don't ask. I don't want to talk about it. Naruto was floating on his stuff, just above the capital city, overlooking its majesty. This was the same place that once housed dragons where the Dragon King Festival were once held. Perhaps this was another angle of history trying to repeat itself. Well, there was at least no evil with the games being played here. It was all just games, just to determine which legal guild was the strongest within Fury. That just meant that all of Fiore's active and most powerful mages would have gathered here. This honestly filled Naruto with a bit of excitement, which he was struggling to contain. But he would have to do so, yes? He didn't want trouble. He shook his head. What was the definition of trouble anyway? The concerning thing was the use of magic by the royals. There was something happening, perhaps a reason for the games. He could sense the dark magic here. No doubt, dogs of the council would be here. If something disastrous was happening, let it happen. He wanted to see the Eclipse Gate. He wanted to see if it really worked, or perhaps the practical application. It was only going to help him in his studies of time magic. After spotting his targets, Naruto descended down like thunder. Rogue and Sting were alarmed when an overwhelming presence suddenly crash-landed in front of them. They came to a halt, gripped by a sense of danger and the hair up, flea signs crawling through the skin. Naruto placed his stuff on his back and took one giant step towards the two dragon slayers. He wore a look of disappointment once more. He was staring at disappointment. He could not sense any overwhelming magic from these people. And yet, they claimed to have killed dragons. He shook his head. Aren't your standards a little high? Kurama asked calmly. But admittedly, none of these so-called dragon slayers had the power to slay a dragon. This is just weak, Naruto said with a slight shake of his head. In the absence of fairy tale dragon slayers, you two became quite famous within Fury, and your boast to have killed your dragon parents. It is honestly dissatisfying, really. If you indeed killed your dragon, how are you so weak? Of course, he knew that was false. If it was not false, they would have turned into dragons already by the use of this dangerous magic. The fact that they were still humans, it just showed that they had not. And that their dragons were probably sleeping within them. This was the only method Zerf mentioned was able to create an antibiotic to stop the dragon seed from manifesting. He wondered if he could even extract the antibiotics from the bodies of these slayers once the whole process is complete. Sting glared. It seemed that this person was really angry just that they are weak as he claims. There had been many battles that he and Rogue fought, but they had not lost. They've always won, because they were strong. It was a little demeaning for this man to stand over them just to tell them that they were weak, in an angry tone like he really knew what he was talking about. We are not that weak. Naruto shook his head. If the Alvarez attacked now, with your current power level, there would be no hope, he said sadly. But truly, both of you need to train harder. Have you even achieved Dragon Force, yet? You are also a Dragon Slayer, Rogue said. Ah, yes, it seems I am, Naruto said while glancing behind. It seems I have also attracted some attention. I will indulge you some time, he said before completely disappearing into thin air. What was that? From his time in the Magic Council, Jelal had come to understand so many things about this world and know more about the dangers that faced it. The Alvarez was certainly a danger. It had once attempted to invade Ishgard before and it could do it again. The fearsome Spriggan 12 were also known for their unmatched strength and destruction. He was shocked when he saw one of them, strolling through the streets carelessly. Jelal had decided to follow the person from behind just to see what he was doing, but if things go wrong, he was willing to blow his cover to fight him, to punish him for this crime. The former wizard saint blinked when the blonde suddenly vanished from sight. He hadn't noticed him, had he? He got his answer. A voice spoke from behind. His body froze? How had he even moved? He didn't know much about the blonde's strength, but just that he was powerful, deadly so. The council had a list of some of the abilities of the Spriggan, but with Naruto, there had always been an air of mystery. Naruto, and you are? Jelal had stopped moving and narrowed his eyes behind. He felt relieved that the blonde hadn't drawn his sword and was just standing there, eyes looking straight at him. He quickly looked away. That was frightening. Generally, and from afar, the blonde looked harmless, but he was a monster. Those were not the eyes of a normal human. Jelal. Naruto took a thoughtful look on his face. You've been following me and your intent towards me became a little difficult to ignore. I felt like something was poking me from behind and it just gets annoying, you know. Then, what do you want from me, Jelal? Are you the same Naruto who is part of the Alvarez Empire? I am Naruto, but I don't know about Alvarez. You could be having me confused with someone or not, but why were you following me, Jelal? Was there reason not to? The Spriggan were not known for being kind. There was nothing but destruction in their wake, and God Serena having joined them, it was all the more reason he should be following this person. He was from an enemy nation. Still, why was it that he felt no intent whatsoever from the blonde? If anything, he really did seem curious about why he was being followed. He wasn't really trying to hide from anyone. I had my reasons. Naruto sighed before smiling. Irene would probably think of a cruel method to make you talk in such a situation, he said, thinking of the woman who showed him many things. But I am a nice person and I don't really care, as long as you don't cause me trouble while I am. He trailed off. Call them. What? Your friends, of course, and if I refuse? Naruto adopted a thoughtful look before shaking his head. I'm thinking it is a little bothersome to try to force the issue, but at the same time, I'm a little bored and drowning in disappointment, he said. Jelal was a former member of the council, and the friend, Naruto recognized them. Ultir was a former member of the council and she was wanted. This was the man who tried to revive that damned power, looking for Zerf. Little did he know, the Black Wizard was very much alive, and just drowning in his misery. These people had betrayed the council and were probably wanted by it. If he made noise now, the mages all over would probably come here and it would not be good for them. They were strong enough to flee from the council knights, but it would only ruin them. Naruto placed his hand on Jalal's right shoulder, putting pressure through his grip. It was so tight that he dug deep, reaching the bones. The former wizard saint was left wincing in pain, unable to fight, unable to make a fuss, as he didn't want to draw attention to himself. He knew, if the rune knights within the capital saw him, they would come after him. Even if he managed to escape, it would just make things difficult for him, as they would now be looking for him knowing that he was here. I can make a loud noise and then alert some people who would be very happy to seal your magic and put you in a cell, awaiting judgment from the Magic Council. I don't know what is up, but obviously, there is something you people are doing here. I don't want to get involved, but just call your friends to come over here, Naruto said with indifference. Jelal tried to resist for a moment, but he didn't feel that Naruto wanted to do something to them. Besides, Ultir had mentioned that she met someone frightening who was involved in a battle with Acnologia and actually managed to escape unscathed. When they had met him, he had only asked about Zeref before departing. Seeing Jelal uncertain, Naruto loosened his grip and then released an overwhelming magic power that hit the mage dead on. It took a second for Jelal to hit the ground with his knees, hands on his chest, breathing labored, and eyes wide with sweat breaking free around his forehead. Within a minute, both Ultir and Merity were surrounding Naruto, but in a subtle manner. However, they did experience the pressure that was being directed to Jelal and halted in place. Naruto looked around. seeing that people were going to start noticing that something was up, and then decided to stop things. "Follow me," he ordered, placing his hands inside his pockets, as he started walking away without even sparing the three a glance. Nothing much had changed. He was still the same frightening person that had made her stiff and decide to jump off a boat and into the sea when he suddenly landed. This was the Naruto of the Alvarez Empire. A frightening man, yet he was apparently not even the strongest of them all. If he was this powerful, what about the others? Well, it was perhaps why God Serena decided to jump the ship and join those people. There was an unspoken agreement to follow the blonde without complaints. Altair led the front, with both Jelal and Merity following her from behind. The blonde didn't lead them far away. They actually sat outside a restaurant and he ordered food, for himself. Looking at the food, Naruto couldn't help but swallow a lump of disgust. He craved such fine meal, but there was no taste that he felt when eating it. He was merely doing this just to remind himself of where he had to go, that he was still miserable and needed to work hard to rid himself of this curse. "No one is going to notice you, you can rest easy," Naruto said in a pleasant tone. He didn't touch his food though. "Now, why are you following me?" "You are part of the Alvarez Empire and the Spriggan, they have nothing but enemies of fury," Jelal said. "We were worried that the Empire might be planning something with you being here." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "That is a little funny coming from you people. Altair, you manipulated Jelal into think you were something you were not. You also manipulated many things to get your hands on Zerf. What was the reason again? Because it does seem that you people are in some sort of repentance journey." The indifference in the tone, and the causal manner in which he glanced at them, Altair knew that this man didn't care about their past deeds or the present. He was merely asking because of curiosity. They didn't have much of a choice here. But before she spoke, she wanted to know something. "Is the Alvarez Empire plotting an attack?" Naruto shrugged. "I left the Empire a couple of years ago, and I was never part of the Spriggan. Someone I knew was just a part of them and I tagged along for convenience," he said casually. "I am here for my reasons. Really, just curious about the magic games." He raised an index finger. "Never mind, you don't need to tell me why you needed to revive Zeref. We actually kept a close eye on both of you. Of course, there are personal reasons that I probably don't know. I will find out about that. Given your question, it is safe to assume you are following me because you assumed me to be threat to fury. But you can rest assured, I am no threat," he then smiled. "Well, it's not like any of you could do anything about it even if I was a threat. But there was a threat, from the Empire at least. Zeref was still going to attack Fury and all nations along the way would be collateral damage. Perhaps he was even bored and looking for a good fight. In the years that Naruto has known the Black Wizard, he had never at once tried to fight the man, even a sparring session. There was never a need. If he wasn't strong, Altair would have felt insulted. This man had escaped from Acnologia, a dragon that nearly wiped out the entire fairy tale guild. Still, the casual way in which he said they could do nothing was a little disturbing. He was not afraid of them, and he didn't view them as a threat. They were inconsequential. She had never felt so frustratingly furious in her life. Wasn't there anything she could do? Nobody had ever lorded to her that she was weak. She had always been special and powerful, but yet, to this person, she was nothing. Just how much of an illusion has she been living under? There were much more powerful beings in this world. Still, just because there were some immovable objects before her, didn't mean that she was going to throw in the towel and give up. There was still much that she could do. In the silence, Naruto spoke once more. "Is the dark magic that has attracted you here?" Jelal narrowed his eyes but still nodded. "I have sensed it, it does seem that something big is going to happen. In any case, I also want to check it. The magic is truly powerful. And of course, there are reasons behind the magic games, of which I intend to find out. If I do, I will tell you." "No doubt, you are going to be around here," the blonde said. "Why would you do that?" "Boredom, looking for something interesting and what you people can do. Your power level can do a lot in this kingdom," Naruto said as he stood up. "Don't follow me again and don't keep watch." There was definitely a threat there, even though it was unspoken. Jelal was curious and so he asked, "What will happen if we do?" Naruto shrugged indifferently. "The least I can do is drive a burning stick through eyes," he said casually before walking away. There was a bit of silence after he left. Jelal shook his head. There was really going to be something happening. And they could not leave. They really had to open their eyes much more than they had intended. Even the face of the Magic Council, they could not afford to stay away, they had to stay still. She even tried kicking it, but she was backed against a wall, held up in the air. The wall gave her no comfort. The eyes that stared at her were cold, void of any emotion. It looked like she was staring at an endless wave of seawater that threatened to embrace her toward death. Even if she could scream, who could help her? She hadn't made friends in her good or bad days. Even her current company was a group of people she manipulated for her agenda, a failed dream she dared dream. Was this the end? The end of her miserable life? If there was an afterlife, it would only be torment. She was ready for it, but she'd wanted to at least do something in her life, at least before she faced the inevitable death that all humans had to go through. Her energy drained, Ultier wanted to laugh. Was this her end? It was a damn worthless end. Inwardly, she laughed at her fate, at her end. She couldn't even be afforded to do something good. But did she expect anything good to come out of her life? She had already decided there was nothing that she could do to make up for the sins that she has committed in her life. Yet, even faced with her death, she wanted to cry. She wanted to shed her tears for the failures that she had to contend with. How did it even come to this? How was telling someone she had a civil conversation with so dangerous that she ended up being in this position without even getting a chance to explain herself? Suddenly, the grip loosened. She fell on the ground with her knees. Her hands immediately went to her throat, trying to gather her breath. She coughed hard. Her labored breaths hurt her chest. The sweat watered her skin, but it gave no comfort. It took a couple of moments for her to gather her breath, and when she did, she looked up, staring at those cold blue eyes that seemed to shine bright along the night. Her heart pounded. He was shadowing her, imposing on her as if he was not human but a monster. He was superior to her. When had she felt so powerless, so weak when standing before a mage? "Don't follow me, and don't keep watch. I thought I made this clear," Naruto said in a cold, menacing tone. Ultier swallowed hard. Was he going to kill her simply because she was following him? If he had nothing to hide, there was no need to go this far, right? Had he lied to them when he said there was nothing bad he wanted to do but was merely here because of boredom? I was curious. Curiosity will get you killed. They do say, curiosity got the cat killed. Naruto stated in the same tone. He then blinked, relieving the pressure off Ultier. He saw her deep intake of breath and nearly smiled, but he held it back. What are you curious about? 7 years ago when I first met you, you asked about Zareth. You were looking for him. I cannot forget the amount of power I felt from you then. While in that boat, I thought of jumping away to avoid you, even if it meant death. You had also been attacked by Agnologia, and yet you survived without a scratch and just took off as if there was nothing wrong. You even attempted to talk to the dragon. My curiosity is in the relationship between you and those two. Naruto placed both hands inside his pockets and motioned for Ultier to follow him. Ultier had no other option. If he wanted to kill her, he would do it, and there was nothing she could do to escape. He was without doubt much stronger than what she imagined. She followed him to the rooftop of a building and then settled on his right. There was a cool breeze, but she could not enjoy it. Not with the fear inside of her heart. Why are you curious? Agnologia is an enemy of humanity and he might possibly attack again. Zareth is also another cause for concern. Nobody has been able to see him since the incident at Tenro Island years ago. The Magic Council has also been looking for him. Not hard enough, but I don't really care of what the council thinks, Naruto said in a dismissive tone. Just by that, there was now no doubt that this person held little opinion about the Magic Council. He didn't even appear to be afraid of it. But then again, when you have as much power as this person, what more did you need? Perhaps it was arrogance, but she was not the one to judge or point out. But you are indeed right. What Agnologia wants is the destruction of all dragons, dragon slayers, and ultimately humans. Zareth will eventually do the same. But it might be possible that Agnologia is merely looking for a worthy opponent. I have so far refused to do so, Naruto said in a measured tone. But if Agnologia were to attack now, there would be nothing any of you can do about it. The so-called dragon slayers are too weak to even wound a normal dragon. Wouldn't you try to defend this place? Naruto smiled. I am a very selfish person. I don't do things that don't benefit me anymore. I used to be selfless, putting others first, but now, I am thinking about me. Of course, I might do something, but I am afraid of fighting that emotionless dragon because I know only one remains standing after the fight. Naruto looked up for a moment before continuing. I may be lying there. I have no relations with Agnologia and I do know Zareth. Maybe a little more than I will ever tell anyone. You were once interested in Zareth because you sought the magic to reverse time, is that correct? Yes, you must show me the magic you wish to employ. Why would I do that? I can snap you neck right now and then go slit the throats of your other little friends before taking your corpse to someone who can read minds to extract that knowledge from you. Ultier stared, speechless. Naruto laughed. We can make a trade. I will give you some information on what you need to fight and perhaps a couple of things you want to know. I might even say I am indebted to you if the magic becomes useful to me. Naruto explained in a light tone before asking. What do you say? The ability of the Rinnegan to be able to manipulate all forms of chakra was something that Naruto craved at the moment. With it, he would have been able to manipulate magic without the many restrictions that he faced because there were those kinds of laws. His dreams would not even be far away because he would have the tool to be able to navigate through the complexity of magic principles. Shaking his head, Naruto waved his right hand, glowing above the mage floating slightly above ground in front of him. The man was restrained, unable to speak or even move an inch of his body. He had never been the one to experiment on humans, but the magic he was using had hardly been perfected. But this was a low-key mage, it was not going to cause problems. A Rune Knight. Magic Council hounds called upon to investigate the suspected presence of Zareth. Now the council was interested in apprehending the Dark Wizard? Well, it was not like it could do it even if it pleased. Nothing learned. He had hoped there would be something interesting, but at least he had learned about 2 new faces that he could look at. The other was Captain Lahar, and the other was someone curious. His hand stopped glowing, and the man fell down on the ground with a light thud. After a moment, he shook his head and turned away from the alley. The night attracted hounds, and huge things. There was no telling what was going to happen. But with so many people within the capital to enjoy the spectacle of the magic games, there was not a lot of air to breathe. Why the sudden interest in what the Magic Council is doing here? Well, there is definitely something happening within the capital. The council is investigating the use of black magic by the royal family and apparently, not for the first time. In any case, the presence of those people and the feeling I have given the movement of magic here does tell me there is a hidden agenda about these games. I don't like being ignorant of things. Kurama shook his head. Are you that bored with your life? If it had been your younger days, you would have certainly been happy to place yourself in the center of attention. Naruto smiled. The past, my friend. That is merely the past. Things change, for the better or worst. In any case, we should go investigate. The Eclipse Gate is here anyway. I want to see it. Flashback. Naruto laid under a tree, reading a book about elemental magic while the dragon he had come to know as Irene was lying a couple of feet away. He had come to know her as a hopeless waste of breath. Even Kurama had not been as hopeless as this woman when his father had strengthened the seal, cutting off his only way to escape after it had loosened over the years. But this woman, this dragon that lived in seclusion, was a sad monstrosity that spoke only about despair. So, Queen of Dragons, Naruto called out. He'd been still, chatting with Kurama and reading for the past couple of days. Irene had told him a bit of her story, and then it had been quiet after he had asked some questions, which she was not willing to answer. A frustrating being that only spoke when it was convenient. Well, at least, she wasn't trying to kill him. The last time he had decided to sleep, he'd been woken up by a huge hand suffocating him to death for simply being careless in her presence. At least she had not made the last attempt of trying to burn him alive. Are you going to continue living your miserable life in seclusion until you end your lifespan? Irene opened her eyes and glanced at the human. No, he was not exactly human, was he? She had a feeling. He didn't feel like he was completely human. And she had seen something in the shadows when his eyes had flashed crimson. He hadn't told her anything about himself. It had simply been Naruto, and that he had been wandering around, studying magic. She was curious about that, but ultimately, didn't care much about his story. He was going to disappear soon, and she would remain. Why had she even bothered telling him anything? Are you going to continue being an annoyance? Should you be calling me that when you are lonely as hell? Regardless of your opinion of me, you should at least be happy that there is someone who can speak to you, perhaps even understand you. Understand? Irene laughed. It was a hollow laugh. Although he didn't feel like human, she had seen him eating human food. He had gone away to fish, sometimes hunting. There had been times she thought of eating him after he brought back meat and then roasted it in her presence. She had no appetite for it. She was dragon, she could not eat it. Hearing this laugh, Naruto was reminded of his treacherous friend Sasuke. The Uchiha had scolded him for once saying that they could understand each other. But how could he? Only the loneliness. He had never known a mother's love, or a father's love. He had never known to belong, to be loved by your sibling. How could he understand the pain of loss? The thought made him sour. He was never going to know what it was like to have a mother, to have a sibling, to go back home with good news just to see the proud look on his mother's face. He'd only seen flashes but not enough to make lasting memories. Naruto shook his head. Wasn't he over this need to be loved? He was a grown man. Maybe not. Naruto said a flat tone. But I'm curious. How do we cross that bridge? I don't know anyone in this world. I have no friends. I am not in the history, although I have been around for a number of years. You keep saying, this world, as if you are not of this world. Naruto smiled. Maybe. Are you going to come up with solutions? We are both lonely people. We may as well do something about it. Perhaps when I depart from here, I can even find reason to come back to seek you out. So, you are going to leave? Yes, I left some dangerous things at my house. I'm afraid if left unattended for far too long, there might be a catastrophe that may expose my existence and destroy the progress I have made. Naruto said in a casual tone. Irene stared for a moment before shaking her head. I could teach you dragon-slaying magic, but in return, you will keep me company. I also want to learn that magic you just displayed. Your unique ability to manipulate all basic elements is intriguing. Mages usually have one type of magic, but you don't have a type of magic, do you? You can freely manipulate your magic in any way you please. If I teach you dragon-slaying magic, it will give you a type of magic, but given that this magic is powerful, and affects your entire being, you might lose your ability to control other magic. However, dragon-slaying magic does enable you to consume any form of magic. It does have its effects nevertheless, but you are able to consume any magic within your element. What are other side effects? I assume if you teach me your magic, I will only be able to become your kind of dragon slayer. If you use fire, I will be able to use fire dragon slaying magic. There are none, and yes. Is there any other way to learn the magic? I don't want to use your magic. It can't be that there is only one method of learning the magic. If there is none, we can learn. Because I want a particular form of magic. There might be a way, but you'd need to be smart enough. Show me your most powerful magic and how advanced it is. Maybe we can talk about creating a different way. I am the one who created this dragon-slaying magic after all. Naruto thought there was something amiss, but he was too keen to learn the magic, and so he shrugged. Still, he did have a feeling that there were some consequences that Irene was not telling him about. He could tell. He could feel it. Lying to him was truly useless, as he could sense negative emotions, but what he knew was that Irene had no intentions of seeing him die, at least not now. And so he nodded. I'm going to show you something. I have already shown you that I can manipulate all 5 basic elements. But as you have seen, the magic is not that powerful. If I was actually fighting someone with specialization in one particular magic, they would obviously have more advantage, the blonde said as he held out his right hand. In a puff of smoke, he summoned a pure black sword. The battle that nearly killed me, there was someone superior who had the ability to combine all the elements to create something deadly. I wanted to recreate it. I did, to some extent, but it isn't nearly as powerful, and it is a little unstable, to the effect that despite my magic power, if I use it, it leaves me drained. This sword is not made of magic, but a different source of energy that I now no longer possess. What can it do? The idea was to be able to turn all living things into ashes, be able to negate all forms of magic. However, I failed at that. I failed. But there is a spell I can cast that is powerful enough to make a memory of many things. The sword itself is able to cut through almost anything. Naruto said, pointing the sword at Irene. Have you ever been to the brink of death? Have you ever had the lower part of your body wiped out of existence? And you are left to wonder how you are still alive after getting over the shock of what just hit you. End of flashback. Do you think that we can actually learn something from this gate? It has been capable of ripping the very fabric of space and time. What we are most concerned about is time, but the gate does provide a practical example, don't you think? As he asked the question, Naruto tilted his head to the left side, avoiding a spear that whizzed just inches away from his ear. He then twisted around, clockwise, while taking a single step forward. He was on the right side of his attacker, his left hand slamming back, and he chopped the mage on the back of his head. He fell flat with a thud. Behind him, there were a couple of more guards, lying on the cold floor within the dark passages underground of the royal castle. By now, the games had already started, but Naruto wasn't that much interested in watching, at least for now. Though, with each passing day, he was beginning to think they were truly interesting. Its magic is a little too advanced for you. Besides, this isn't purely magic, it involves some technological instruments that you know nothing about, Kurama said in a quiet tone. You're not helping, Naruto said, placing both hands inside his coat, as he ventured deep into the castle. While we may not be able to decipher it, we can at least learn more about the amount of magic it requires. They have spent a couple of years gathering magic for this gate to be operational. You have gathered enough magic, Kurama reminded Naruto. But then again, even I don't know what you exactly plan on doing. Naruto was silent. The operation he wanted to perform would require large reserves of magic that he may not even be able to wield at once. If that was the case, everything could end just as it began. He was not willing to fail even on the first try. The cost of losing magic he has spent years collecting, learning to control and harvest, he could not permit that to go into smoke by trying half-baked plans. If he was going to go all out, everything had to be near perfect. As strong-willed as he was, Naruto wasn't too sure how he would handle the possibility of never regaining his humanity again. He hasn't failed at all with his plans. He still had hope. He hasn't even tried anything. Perhaps he had failed to act on the whims of panic to avoid ending up hopeless like Irene. What I seek is into something specific that woman, Ultir sought to reverse time, to the day she still had her mother. But that may even be much simpler than what I want to do. Naruto said in a serious tone. The fact that she seems a bit hesitant to give me that knowledge is a little problematic. I thought I'd done things a little smoother. Nothing says smooth like threatening to kill someone with a smile. Maybe I should have done things a little differently, Naruto said with a slight shrug. In such things, it is best to be nice. She holds knowledge that I need. I cannot get it from her head. She can lie to me if threatened, or even twist things to my foil. We must be nice people who can be trusted and not viewed as a threat, he added with a smile before coming to a halt. The Eclipse Gate, he had heard about it from the Heartfilia woman, and from Zirf. But he'd not thought it would be something so majestic. Zirf had truly outdone himself. Naruto entertained the thought of using the gate to go back 400 years back into the past as well, but he quickly snapped the thought before he did something crazy. Besides, there had to be the reason the royal family was even trying to activate the gate. Naruto was interested in learning the reason, but as far as he was concerned, they needed all 12 zodiac keys to operate it. Kurama appeared in a puff of smoke on Naruto's right shoulder. He quickly realized that the gate was absorbing magic. It was a dangerous place for him to be around. But, with Naruto unfettered, he could stay put. Then, how are you going to learn anything? Well, we'd have to see it being used and study how magic reacts around it. Naruto said with a slight shrug. He then held out his right hand. He glanced behind when he sensed a handful of people. Well, this is a better way of getting the people in this little adventure. Kurama glanced at Naruto through the corner of his eyes, and then shook his head. Naruto had truly grown. He had truly grown. Sometimes he really could not tell what the blonde was thinking. There was no doubt that the blonde was going to try to do everything himself. The reason he even bothered fighting the guards was to alert the people responsible that there was an intruder. It was truly amazing just how the blonde had changed over the years. But then again, this was to be expected. Just don't get carried away, the Biju said silently before resting in a relaxed posture on Naruto's shoulder, with his eyes closed. Naruto only smiled as he turned around to look at the people. He took a single step forward, just to watch the movements. The tall man in the armor was the strongest, and the green-haired was the princess. He stopped, and then turned around to face the Eclipse Gate, without care about those behind him, who could suddenly attack him. Aren't you being a little reckless? At this distance, any magic that gets released will probably be absorbed by the gate. Naruto responded with a slight shrug. Is that not right? He asked the people behind him. Arcadios stepped up, shielding Hisui from anything that may come. Who are you? He demanded, but he knew, the blonde was dangerously powerful. A thing to observe was the fact that he hadn't even killed any of the guards. They were just knocked out with blows to the heads, and nothing more. And the fact that he was willing to just give him his back meant he knew what he was standing in front of. They were dealing with someone who knew things he shouldn't know. He hadn't stumbled on this thing, he had come here. How had he even known about it? Was he from the Magic Council? It would be troublesome if that was the case. The council was already investigating the royal family for the use of black magic. Naruto turned around once more and then slowly walked towards the royal and her knight. His expressionless mask caused some tension that he tried hard not to express his joy in seeing. Anything could happen. Someone could suddenly attack him. And, he could suddenly react in reflex and end up blowing things though with the gate there. It was unlikely as it would be to just absorb the magic. Princess Hisui. Naruto directly addressed the green-haired woman, being shielded by the Arcadios. Are you the one responsible for the gate, or perhaps its current activity since its existence surpasses that of this place, and by far? As if to intercept him from making any moves, Arcadios took a step closer to him, but Naruto still did not look at the man but rather, looked past him. What was this man of no consequence to him? He was not interested in any battle, but if the princess was truly the one behind the project to activate the gate, then she was an intelligent woman who could be of some use to him. There was no need to make enemies of these people, but of course, convincing them that he meant no harm would not be so simple. Arcadios stared at Naruto, trying to find his angle. By now, it did seem that the blonde knew things. Yet, he didn't seem to have figured out that the princess was behind the project. What to do in this situation? He was not going to be foolish to try to fight when it did seem that the blonde had no intention whatsoever of fighting anyway. What do you want? He was a little irked by the fact that he was being overlooked. After his question, Naruto faced him with an expressionless mask that made him unconsciously reach to his sword. The blonde smiled. This is good, he said. You stand in front of the princess despite the challenge. One must always remain loyal to their liege regardless of the challenge. However, I have not come here for any fight with any of you. The guards were simply disabled because they were in the way. Ah, and I am not from the Magic Council. If you are not from the Magic Council, who are you and what do you want? How do you even know about this? Too many questions, but it isn't like I have any other choice. I could force my way here, but I wish not to bring ruin to this kingdom's future ruler. The Dragon King festivals were once held here. It is an important place that I wish to freely walk within. Naruto said to himself more than to the people before him. What should we do, Kurama? Be civil. The Biju said. It is likely that these people are being misled by whoever led them to this. That woman, Anna, said there were no plans to use it again. And as the first person to have used the portal, I doubt she would be lying. Naruto nodded. It would be amazing if someone were lying. This had nothing to do with the original mission that saw the gate being conceived with those dragons and Zareth. The Black Wizard hadn't even said anything. But then again, for it to be used once more, he was not needed. Just the 12 keys and they were probably all gathered here. Naruto, I am merely a wandering mage and I know about this gate because Zareth told me about it. I know how it works, and that the Magic Council would probably point its weapons here if they found out it was being activated. In any case, I am merely curious. Is the princess the one behind this? The blonde said with casualness. No, Arcadios said forcefully. Naruto stopped smiling and then wagged his index finger. I'm generally nice and pleasant, but I don't like it when you lie so bluntly. You are also wasting my time. He smiled to himself. Wasn't he being dramatic? Since when has he ever worried about someone wasting his time? What happens when you have received the answers that you seek? Princess Hisui questioned, as she stepped out from behind her guard. Nothing really. Naruto said with a wave of his right hand. No matter the reasons, I won't do anything. I am merely curious about how the portal works. You do understand everything about it, no? Hisui stared at the blonde for a long minute. She could not tell what he wanted or if he wanted to stop this project. Just because he said he didn't want to do anything but was simply curious didn't mean that it was the truth. He could be lying for all she knew. Still, how could she go about this situation? What was he of help to her plan to save this kingdom? If he could help, he was not needed, was he? Could she just take the cautious method and just have him detained to avoid any unnecessary problems? It didn't seem fair, but he had already broken into the castle and defeated the guards. Naruto suddenly said. Things will not end well for you, princess. It is unlikely to use magic in this place, given that we are close to the portal, but... Arcadio's eyes went wide. Within the blink of an eye, the blonde was standing between him and the princess. The palm of his right hand right in her face and his stuff pointed at his back, locked on his heart. How had he moved so quickly? He could not make a careless move because the princess would be in danger. Why had he even permitted her to come this far when it had become true that there was an intruder? This was failure on his part. Princess stood, trembling with eyes wide. He was not releasing any magic, but the look on his eyes, those inhuman eyes, they made her heart kick her rib cage. She was afraid. Truly afraid of this man. No, was he even a man? He appeared to be something much more than that. She was not staring at a man but a beast. Within a second, the pressure that nearly brought her down to her knees disappeared. And she let loose of a long breath. Naruto was smiling, but his stuff remained pointed at Arcadios. You look like a very nice person, princess. I can tell you are a kind person. There is no evil in your eyes. I see fear, a little girl with responsibility who is afraid. But it is not fear of your simple death. What is it? I'm afraid to die without saving this kingdom from the despair that awaits it, Hisui said in a forceful tone. Naruto tilted his head to the side. What does that have to do with Eclipse? It is to stop it. Naruto blinked. How the hell was a time portal going to stop the future that she was truly afraid of seeing? How did she even know about it? Can you see the future? Hisui shook her head. Someone did, someone from the future. Certain events that I was warned would occur have already happened. I didn't believe it nor had I made any decision on what I would do, but what I was told, the outcome of the matches has come true. I still want to observe more before I make a final decision. Naruto frowned. Someone from the future. What was happening? Had someone used the portal in the future to come here? What was happening in this world? He hadn't expected anything of this kind when he came here. He may even have to deviate from some of his plans because it did look like something big was going to happen. Did he now want to know? Probably, but he could just watch what was happening before deciding to take part. I see. Naruto said quietly, we will talk soon. And just like that, he was gone. The Grand Games were a feast. They just showed just how different this world was compared to the shinobi world. There was that bit of evil in this world, as was in the shinobi world, but this was nothing. These games were nothing compared to the Chunin exams where some killed just for the fun of it, and some plotted not so noble intentions. This game was made just to see the strongest guild in Fury with people watching with much fanfare. There was a bit of cruelty every now and then, but nothing disastrous. Everything was tolerable. Naruto blinked, his morals were becoming truly warped. He needed to be careful. You are not thinking of doing something stupid, are you? Naruto raised an eyebrow. He was simply observing the games. He had been doing so for the past couple of days. There were no incidents with Ultier and her team. There was no running in with the Magic Council and certainly nothing as yet that has made him wish he could enter the fray and trample some mages. What makes you think like that? You are bored. I cannot be bored watching the child of Irene fight. I will be honest, her fighting spirit is truly tremendous. She loves her teammates and is willing to go the extra mile for them. A little reckless and she appears to be too tight, but nothing I can't handle. From what he's seen, anything that may seem to be a threat to her guild and friends, that woman was going to fight against. If she viewed him as a threat, nothing would happen. Hopefully, Makarov was not going to badmouth him because he did not need to use a firm hand on the old man. Besides, there is something that is going to happen with Eclipse. I have decided not to do anything that may drastically change things because I want to see what will happen. Even when you know that woman is being lied to. Yes, Naruto said with a nod. I'm curious about what kind of event is going to take place in this city. There might be chaos, but nothing will go bad if Acnologia doesn't show up. Considering that I amused him a little last time around, he might be much more interested in stomping on me. I wish he would. We'd die, Naruto pointed out. Not before you find a way to escape. The Biju responded in a sarcastic tone. Naruto shrugged and looked at the fairy tale group from where he sat. He was sitting like a spectator with normal people, just watching and observing the games. The one moment he had nearly went out was to face Kagura's sword. It was powerful, but he wondered what the sword would be able to do in his hands. But he'd held himself because he didn't want to interfere with Urza's battle. Makarov tensed when he felt an unwelcome person appear behind them. He had simply appeared from thin air. When the others finally saw him, they tensed, but no one did anything. This is a nice view, Naruto said as he walked past the group and stood by the balcony, leaning against the wall as he observed the happenings. Ah, the first is also around. Makarov frowned and walked to stand beside the blonde. He jumped on the wall to be able to see. I was hoping you'd not show your face. Naruto glanced at the old man. That would only mean that he already knew that he was around the capital. Naruto thought about it for a moment before shrugging. You shouldn't show so much displeasure at my presence. You are even winning the games. I mean, the last matches are arriving. There was still Jura to think about, and Makarov was thinking that was going to be a troublesome battle. But it had nothing to do with Naruto. Are you here because of that? Yes, and I need to speak to you. About? War with the Alvarez and Urza. He then glanced at the old man for a moment before adding. Don't be concerned, they can't hear us. Makarov looked at his children and saw their confusion. He hadn't seen the blonde cast any spell on them. What sort of trick was it? They were not speaking telepathically so someone could read their lips. He shook his head. But, I can hear you, Mavis said. In this case, you are not a matter because you are a ghost. The blonde said in a flat tone. I know about Urza, where she comes from actually. Makarov glared at Naruto through the corner of his eye. That was something he didn't want to hear from Naruto. What did he want to do with it and why was he telling him about this? There was obviously something the blonde wanted. And, he had been praying and hoping he would not get drawn to any of his children. How do you know that? He demanded. I knew her while she was in her mother's womb. That is to say, I knew her mother. Naruto explained lightly. She was very important to me and I want to try to build a relationship with Urza. And I would honestly appreciate it if you did not get in between. So, that's why you came to our guild last time around. Why now? Mavis asked. Irrelevant, Naruto said with a shrug. A warning. The Empire might strike again, because they know your secret and want it. But you can rest easy, it's not something that will happen tomorrow. But it will, and if there is someone who is going to decimate their armies, it's me. The blonde spoke with a smile. He was not smiling about what he was trying to say but what he was seeing. Your grandson is incredibly skilled, Makarov. Before Makarov could respond, the blonde was already gone. We have a guest in the ring, the announcer exclaimed loudly. Is he associated with any guild? There were boulders that had been created by Jura, some broken down by Makarov. But this was a good kind of field. He already knew just how strong the wizard saints were. Makarov was one. And their most powerful Serena had already joined the Alvarez Empire. It would be incorrect to say that this continent was not blessed with powerful mages. Acnologia was created here. Zarif was from here and so were both Irene and the Wizard King. The problem was just about holding onto their talent. But this was not merely for his entertainment. He wanted to show these people that what they thought to be real power was not so much real power. There was more to it. There was much more power than what they could imagine. A woman like Irene would certainly wipe the floor with these two. Her power could not be compared even to the so-called gods of Ishgar. An unwarranted title. It made a mockery to the true gods. You. Laxus started in a low tone. You know him? Jura asked, curiously looking at the blonde before him. He was almighty powerful, there was no doubt about that. His posture was just another thing. Those blank eyes that were not even staring at them spoke volumes. No, Laxus shook his head, but I saw him some time ago. He was at my guild talking to the old man. Naruto could feel the tension in the air, the loud noise from the arena. But no one really wanted to interfere. He was fine with anything. He held out his right hand and stared at it. For all these years living in hiding, and now he was opening himself like this. He was revealing himself to people, to this world, to the Magic Council. They were going to know about him. They would draw interest and try to speak to him, or maybe not. Anything could happen. Naruto took a single step forward, and when he touched the ground, it silently trembled. Another step, and it grew louder. Jura's boulders started to crumble down, blue flames started to pour out, but they didn't produce heat. Not even a little, but the air around the atmosphere became thick. Gusts of wind slowly started to pick up, debris rose, and both Laxus and Jura jumped away from him. Stop. It was a voice inside his head, but Naruto knew this voice. Zarif, what are you doing here? I can't let you show this power. I believe that is what you want them to see. There are monsters in this world, but they can't know that, not now. I'm doing it. If you do it, I'll kill all the spectators in the stadium, and everyone within this city. I might even summon Irene here to do it in her dragon form, while keeping you busy. If we fight, Acnologia will no doubt show up and this place will get wiped out of existence. She was a ghost all right, but Mavis could feel the tremors. The very atmosphere was trembling at the level of power being displayed there. That was not a man you wanted to fight with. Now she understood why he appeared to be closer to Zarif. She understood why he had joined the Alvarez Empire and why Makarov was always wary of him. When had she felt so much power before? Acnologia was a monster, but it was understandable. He was a dragon, but this was a human before them. Or perhaps he was not truly. Is this what you were afraid of? She asked the third master. Makarov nodded. But it is no way in the level of power he displayed when standing in front of the Spriggan, the old man stated through gritted teeth. Why has he suddenly just come to a standstill? He was taking a step and suddenly, he seemed to just come to a standstill like he had frozen. Mavis wanted to say something, but he was likely in a conversation with someone, telepathically. And judging by his twisting expression, he was not having a pleasant conversation. Suddenly, he just disappeared into thin air. Without a trace, and everyone took a collective breath. The end. Thanks for watching. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.